Christopher, you said you got the clock, right?
Yes. Yes, I do.
For life.
All right, it is 7 o'clock, so why don't we go ahead and call this December 9th Albany Planning and Zoning Commission hearing to order. I'm sorry, I am struggling to pull up the agenda here, so just give me 1 second. But we will go ahead and take roll call.
Okay, Commissioner Donaldson?
Here.
Commissioner Kent?
Here.
Commissioner McLeod?
Here.
Chair Waddy?
Here. Great. So moving on to item 3 on our agenda, ex parte communications. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose tonight?
No.
No?
Nope.
All right. Seeing none, then we will close item 3. Moving on to item 4 on our agenda, which is the consent calendar. The consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted on by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the commission. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the commission or a member of the public requests removal of any of these items. First up, we have item 4-1, the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from October 28th. Item 4-2, Planning Application 20-058. This is a design review and conditional use for building permit lift and conversion at 718 Carmel. Item 4-3, Planning Application 20-055, design review, parking reduction and conditional use for a 2-story addition at 1120 Key Route. Item 4-4, which I believe is being pulled off of the consent calendar, which is item planning application 20-062 at 838 Talbot. So knowing that item 4-4 is being pulled off consent, do any members of the commission wish to remove any of the items 1 through 3 from the consent calendar?
I'm fine with all 3. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Commissioner McLeod, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to remove item 4-3, 1120 Key Route.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, we'll have a separate conversation then on that. So then it looks like we're remaining with items 4-1 and 4-2 on the consent calendar.
There's a public that would like to perhaps remove an item.
Okay, great. I was going to say, Chris, can you please let us know if there's any public comment who'd like to speak on these items, So we are looking at now items 4-1 and 4-2. If you have comments on items 4-3 or 4-4, we will call those separately at a later time. Oh, Chris, I think you're on mute.
Sue, are you seeing any?
There you go.
Sorry, I'm not seeing any hands raised. And Sue, are you seeing any?
There. I don't know if they can hear me.
Okay, Mark Wilson, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm the owner of 1120 Key Route. I was just curious why my house was taken off the consent agenda.
So we'll speak to that separately, since Commissioner McLeod requested to hear that one separately. So we'll call that item separately, and we'll give you an opportunity to speak after we deal with items 4-1 and 4-2. Chris, are there any other public comments for items 4-1 and 4-2?
Yeah, hi, this is Jeremiah, public comment. Can I remove 4-1 and 4-2 for discussion, please?
Okay. With that, then, no items are remaining on the consent calendar. So why don't we go ahead and hear item 4-1. This is the commission meeting minutes from October 28th, seeing as no commissioners had any items to discuss on this. Jeremiah, why don't we go ahead and open it up? You wanted to comment on item 4-1. Jeremiah, now would be your time to speak. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wanting to suggest, I'm not sure what's going on exactly with the remodeling or the driveway, the construction, the additions. I was just wondering if we could keep in mind the city's plan to move toward electric vehicles and electrical appliances for 2030. I
Jeremiah,
believe.
just sorry to interrupt you really quick. Item 4-1 is the meeting minutes. So we are only discussing if you have any concerns with the published meeting minutes from the meeting of October 28th. Are you commenting on the meeting minutes?
I'm sorry, I
Or
was
is this-
waiting for 4-2.
Okay, great. So if no one has any items then on any comments on item 4-1, the meeting minutes, why don't we go ahead and have a motion on that item?
I'll move approval of the minutes
great.
from October 28th. Mhm.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, with that motion then Commissioner McLeod,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Kent,
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. That item passes 5-0. We'll move on now to item 4-2, which is planning application 20-058, design review and conditional use for a building lift and conversion at 718 Carmel. Jeremiah, you requested to pull this off the consent calendar. Before we go there, staff, do you want to do a presentation or should we just turn it over to the public comment? What would you recommend?
I think we can just turn it over to the public comment, and if a summary is needed, we can do that later.
Okay, great. So Jeremiah, now would be your opportunity to speak on the design review and conditional use for 718 Carmel.
Thank you, Chair Waddy. I really appreciate it. I was just hoping that we could keep in mind the city's plan on electrical cars and electrical appliances for the next 10 years, moving toward 100% electricity. If we could, incorporate in all these designs for driveways, just make sure there's, room for electric charging stations. And if they're going to add, additions to the buildings, also we can include some sort of, solar panels and things like that. And also during the construction and the additions, I would say public safety for the sidewalks, just to make sure there's no construction debris like nails or screws or saw blades or anything left for any of the public to accidentally step on or get injured during the construction of this. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Chris, are there any other public comments on this item?
No.
Okay, great. Then with that, we will close public comment. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments, or would anyone like to make a motion on this item?
I would like to move approval of item 4-2.
Okay. Sorry, was that second from you, Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, great. With that second, then I'll call the motion. Commissioner McLeod,
Yes.
Commissioner Kent,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Item 4-2 then passes 5-0. Sorry, staff, does this one have story polls up? I forgot to check in advance, but
Yeah.
if this does have story polls, just remember there is the 14-day appeal period. So to leave those up until the totality of the expiration. With that, we will move on then to item 4-3 on the consent calendar. This is planning application 20-055, design review, parking reduction and conditional use at 1120 Key Route. Again, this was pulled off consent by Commissioner McLeod. Staff, would you like to give a presentation or just open it up for the questions or comments from Commissioner McLeod?
We can just open up to the questions and comments by Commissioner McLeod.
My concerns are really, it's not for the parking reduction. I have no problem with that, given the tight lot, the limited space in front. It's mostly looking at the design, the elevations especially. I don't know if you can pull up that screen, that page. It would be page A4. I just have concerns about the design. I am not really, I really question this use of a trellis, what they're calling a trellis around the perimeter of the upper story. I just think it looks a little odd and out of place, and I don't, I don't really see any design logic there or any kind of, I really don't know what the design intent with that is. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then I'm also looking at the round windows, and I just feel like they don't really make a part of any kind of composition that's coherent. Don't quite understand why they're there. You know, all the, you know, it just looks odd to me. The whole thing on the upper part with the trellis. And I don't particularly like the attic vents either. I don't see any reason why they should, you know, just as a design element, that doesn't make sense to me. I'd rather see some maybe more discreet roof vents, eyebrow vents, something like that. So those are my main concerns. You know, the back roof, the addition roof looks awfully tall, although I guess they're trying to, well, they're not exactly matching the same roof pitch as the front, but, or are they? But I just have a concern about especially the front facade with the 2 round windows, the trellis, and then there's kind of a blank stucco area to the left of it. I just don't feel like that's a very good or a very attractive design for this addition. And I would like to see something done a little differently there, or it just would make sense to me to redesign that. Perhaps we could hear from the applicant or the architect and hear what their thinking is on that. So
Sure. Chris, is the project architect or applicant on the line who can give us either a brief presentation or respond to Commissioner McLeod's questions or comments?
I see the property owner. I don't see the architect. Architect, if you're in the audience, please raise your hand if you want to speak on the item.
Well, in the meantime, if the architect's not there, maybe we can open it up to the property owner if they can opine on the sort of the design vision for this addition.
Sure. Mark Wilson is the property owner. You have 3 minutes or 5 minutes to speak.
I apologize to Commissioner McLeod that you believe this is ugly. We tried to do everything we could to make it within code. The round windows, our architect thought that it would add an aesthetic value. I did not understand if it is a code violation.
There's a round
There's a round window across the street. We thought it would match. We very, very much worked very hard and paid a lot of money to an architect to make sure that this design stayed in accordance with our neighbors. Part of the reason we love 1120 Key Route is that all these houses look the same, and we wanted to make the house, if you come and look at our site polls, it clearly blends in. You can't even see the whole back design from the front, and that's kind of what we wanted to do to really make it mold in. The trellis, if that is going to cost us money, we could take it down. It's an optional issue that our architect put on. He thought, and I kind of agree with him, that typically when you drive around Key Route or when you drive around Albany, there's just these boxes on top of their houses, and thought that a trellis would maybe add a little bit of dimension to it, but it clearly was aesthetic. We believe it was in the code. I would hope our plan for our house would be approved, not based on somebody's aesthetics, but based on whether or not we are adhering to the code and not some arbitrary aesthetic value. The attic vent, I'll be completely honest with you, Commissioner, pardon my friend, I could care less. It's our architect designed it. And I think we could erase it if you have that much concern. Like if you have other vents, I could be completely honest. The idea of an attic vent has never entered my mind. I'm just trying to build a bedroom for my children. And so I would hope that the commission would approve it. We really have done everything to work with our neighbors to make sure this is a design that looks exactly like our neighbors would like. We have reached out, showed the plans to every single one of our neighbors, from Kay across the street to Alan and Amy to Brad and Steve right next door, to our neighbors, even across the street on the Masonic Drive. And in all actuality, all of them have stated how much they like the idea of the trellis. And so I'm kind of perplexed with it. But if it's something, I'm going to be very frank, if it's something that's going to cost me money, I can happily take an eraser and erase the trellis if it would please the commission. But I would hope that just the fact that you don't like a round window or a trellis wouldn't hold up the ability for me to have a bedroom for my children. So thank you.
All right, why don't we, Chris, are there any other members of the public comment? Why don't we go ahead and open it up to see if there is public comment on this item, and then we'll turn it back to the commission.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised for this item.
Okay, then with that, we will close public comment on this item and we'll turn it back to the commission. Commissioner.
Public comment.
Oh, sure. Jeremiah, public comment. Go ahead.
Please and thank you. Hi. Yeah, just again, I just was on the EV 101 meeting earlier before this meeting, and the emphasis is electric vehicles. I just want to hope that this addition and these electric garages and stuff incorporate some way to charge the electric vehicle. And my main question is, I don't understand it properly, probably, with the parking space, the off-street parking reduction. Does that mean that there is a parking space in the driveway, and then with the remodel, there won't be a parking space anymore? So that means there's one extra car on the block to try to find parking. I'm not sure what Albany's policies are, but I know policies in other cities and other areas. I mean, the first thing you got to do is build a 2-car garage. You know, there's got to be parking available. So maybe I'm confused about the parking situation, but I would hope that you keep some sort of parking off street in case the house is sold or something, or somebody is ADA or handicapped and they need to park off the street, because with an electric vehicle, you're not supposed to run an extension cord across the sidewalk to the street. It's good to charge your electric vehicle in the driveway. You could run it through the mail slot or underneath the garage door. So I just want to make sure everything's lined up for the future of Albany and the future of electronic situations.
Thank you for your public comment. Chris, are there any other members of public comment? Last call here.
The property owner raised his hand again.
I believe the property owner has already spoken. So certainly to the property owner, if we have any follow-up questions, we'll ask, but we're going through this sort of property owner presentation, public comment, and we'll turn it back to the commission for deliberations. So with that, if there are no other members of the public wishing to speak, we'll go ahead then and close public comment and turn it back to the commission for commissioner deliberations. Are there any commissioners who have initial thoughts or any additional comments on this item? Commissioner Donaldson? Oh, we'll go Commissioner Donaldson, raise your hand, and then Commissioner.
Okay, go ahead. Doug, go ahead.
Chris, you want to go ahead? Oh, okay.
Okay, sure. I generally agree with Commissioner McLeod. I think that trellis structure looks really kind of, I don't see it on the other buildings on that street, and it does look a little bit high maintenance, not really needed, a lot cleaner without it. I don't think it's a big ask, and to the owner, I don't think anyone wants to oppose you building. We just want to make sure, we are letting you have build this thing within a kind of a non-conforming walls, and so that's a big give right there. So I think a little give and take on comments from the panel should be well received. The round windows, I could give or take on those, but I do think the trellis structure, it looks a little cluttered to my eye. That's about it.
All right. I guess I can make a couple comments. Let's see. I think first to Jeremiah, I don't think there's any parking change here. There's still a garage. There is a garage now. And the driveway is too short to store a car. So I think there's no change from the existing situation, if my recollection is correct. I did notice the trellis, and I did scratch my head about it, Ian, when I was out there looking at it. And I thought probably the architect was looking to add some interest and some sort of decoration, some differentiation with the trellis on what would be a very tall and pretty large wall. And so I was inclined to accept that. And if it were to go away, it would save them money, and I think it might be okay to do. But maybe we could have sort of staff look at maybe some differentiation in materials or color, or a belly band at some point, sort of separating the two levels and interrupting the tall plane of a couple of those walls. Might help. I thought that was what the trellis was sort of kind of do, add a decoration element to add some interest on what are really very tall and flat walls. So if it were to go away, I could support that, I think, but I think we could ask maybe staff to work with the architect to add something that would break up the pretty expansive area on a couple of those walls on the one side. So I didn't really have a problem with the round windows. They look like they illuminate the stairs, the staircase. And I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. If the owner says there's windows like that in the neighborhood, and I noticed he was using round vents in several places on the roofs, I thought that the circular feature kind of fit in, and I think I was okay with that. So those are my comments right now. Mm-hmm.
Sure, and I'll just jump in with a couple of quick comments here. I do think, and just for sort of the property owner's edification, this isn't simply sort of a code compliance issue that is part of our analysis. There is also the residential design guidelines, which is a discretionary component as it relates to the architectural design review. So just to make sure you sort of understand part of what our rationale and deliberations are here. And again, also, I don't disagree, Commissioner McLeod, with your comments. I think this is, I don't think it's a bad design by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think there could be a couple of tweaks to make it an improved design. And I too would be supportive of giving some general guidance to staff to continue so that we can move on this item this evening, give some guidance to staff to continue working with the property owner. My thought on the round window is, looking across the street, I actually don't really see round windows. There's a Palladian window across the street that looks like a non-original window alteration on the building directly across the street, but I certainly don't think that is a sort of a traditional architectural feature found in the neighborhood. And I also don't think you really pick architectural features from other buildings and apply them to your style of building. Like, you kind of need to, in my opinion, keep with the architectural style of the subject property while keeping with general context of the neighborhood. You don't sort of pick from a menu of other buildings. So, I mean, my suggestion on this, and it sounds like this may be the sort of consensus here, is to remove the trellis feature, and in lieu of the round windows, apply more of a traditional, so either casement window or double hung window or sort of small fixed window that works within the stair configuration, understanding there's some physical constraints with it being a stair access, but something that's a little more sort of rectilinear in shape rather than a circular window. And just have staff continue to figure out placement of those windows such that it breaks up that facade massing, but works with the stair placement. And with that change of replace circular windows with a more traditional rectilinear window, remove the trellis, I'd be supportive of moving this project forward. Are there any other comment, or is that Commissioner Jennings? Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, I think that these are all fine design suggestions, and I appreciate those on the commission who have more of an eye for design than I myself do. Weighing in with those thoughts, I didn't think there was anything objectionable about the design, and would be perfectly comfortable voting, in favor of it as is. But I'm also comfortable with, if the applicant and architect are willing to work with staff on refining some of those details, it sounds like it could make it an even better project.
Commissioner McLeod.
I just wanted to, yeah, follow up. And, you know, I'm not against round windows per se, but I feel like they need to be part of a coherent design or some sort of design logic or some sort of composition that makes sense. And I don't see that here. I mean, maybe if they were balanced on the front facade with something to the left of them, it might help it, or another window to, you know, just at the moment, just have two circles and a rectangle, and it just doesn't make sense, you know, logical, sort of a design way. And same with I think it's the left elevation. It's just one round window and one rectangular window. I mean, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense as a design composition. You know, I think the trellis, it just kind of looks like it's just too stuck on to me. I think it would be probably kind of expensive. I think there'll be a whole host of waterproofing issues with it, which, you know, it's not necessarily part of our bailiwick, but, you know, I think it would be a long-term problem with wood rot and penetrations into the building. And I think it would look a lot cleaner and simpler without it. And then I agree that, you know, there would be a lot of sort of blank stucco, and then I'd be comfortable with letting staff work with the applicants to, you know, come up with some ways to try to break up that messing a little bit with whatever elements, you know, the architect can work with. So I'd be happy to move forward with this, with the trellis being removed. And, you know, I'm ambivalent about the round windows, but I think it really should be worked in better as a composition, especially on the front wall where you have two round windows and then a blank stucco space next to it. So, I mean, I suppose we could leave that up to staff too. I think the addition of another window or two on that facade, or at least higher up, would be helpful. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. I think I'm fine with Commissioner McLeod's comments. I don't think we've talked about the roof vent either. And I personally don't have a problem if that goes away. And if the applicant thinks that it will be expensive and add expense, then I think it's okay to do that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, don't we have to have a roof vent?
Well, yeah, there is a roof venting requirement, but you can do it much simpler without, you know, it's sort of integrated into the roofing and it's very discreet, just little eyebrow vents. And the end gable vents also serve as venting. So, yeah, you know, I'm sure they can manage that with the roofing company quite easily. For me, that's just another little element that's just a little distracting. I don't see how it's helping the design, so.
Okay.
Commissioner McLeod, would you like to maybe propose a motion to reflect this?
Sure.
And we can move this forward?
Yeah, I'll propose that we approve item 4-3. Not sure which number it is after that. Item 4-3, 1120 key route parking reduction, vertical wall extension, with the condition that the trellis is removed and that the applicants work with staff on the breaking up of the vertical facades visually, and also, well, I'll leave it up to the applicants to decide if they want to keep the attic vents or not, but I would also suggest working with staff on the front facade with the round windows. That's acceptable. So I'll make that motion.
Okay. Staff, does that give you guys enough direction? Okay, yeah. Great. Then on that, do we have a second on that motion?
No, I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Donaldson. With that, we will call the vote then. Commissioner Kent.
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings.
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that item passes 5-0. This is subject to the 14-day appeal period. So applicant, please do leave your story polls up for the duration of that as you continue to work with staff on those revisions. But this item is then approved with those conditions. With that, then we will move on to the last item on the consent calendar, item 4-4. This is planning application 20-062. Design review and parking exception for a house lift and addition at 838 Talbot Avenue. And we will go ahead with a full staff presentation to kick things off.
Yes,
Staff?
thank you. This application for design review at 838 Talbot was originally placed on the consent calendar. However, there has been a design revision that we wanted to present to the commission and also give the applicant an opportunity to explain. So with that, we'll give you a brief overview and take questions. Just to give you some background, the property is a 4,000 square foot lot with an existing 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1,039 square foot home built in 1922. City records show that there's been some miscellaneous repair work over the years, including electrical service upgrades, drainage, and some voluntary seismic upgrades, and more recently, sewer lateral replacement. This is an image of the house as it sits today. And the applicant is proposing to add just a little over 1,100 square feet of newly conditioned space to the house. And to do that, they're proposing to lift the house and work within the existing building envelope. There is a lower level. However, those existing ceiling heights are less than the code minimum of 7 feet. So the applicant is proposing to convert that space to a proper ceiling height and utilize it as 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, as well as a laundry room. With respect to new construction, they are proposing a 356 square foot master suite addition at the rear of the first floor. And above that would be a roof deck that would be accessible from the kitchen, which would be located on the second floor. Altogether, this would result in a 2,186 square foot 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home with a maximum height of 23 feet 9 inches. There is one off-street space provided in the attached garage, and a parking exception is being sought to locate that second off-street parking space in the driveway. And this is a rendering of the house as it looks today. And this is actually a revised rendering. This is different from what was in your staff report in the original packet. The applicant has redesigned the front entry to have a staircase that effectively switches back, creates a landing, and then accesses the front yard. So the front door has been relocated to the side, and a window has been placed in that location. Within the staff report, there is analysis related to that stairway design. It was originally proposed to go straight out into the front yard, which would have encroached beyond the 6-foot allowance and would have been within 1 foot of that front yard property line. So this is the side view and then the site plan view to give you an idea of the dimension of those previously designed stairs. And so with this, the revised design encroaches 6 feet 5 inches, which is much, much closer to compliance. We would recommend that a condition of approval be included to see if that 5 inches could be reduced to get the stairs to exactly 6 feet. And that could be worked out as part of the building permit process. Due to the floor area ratio, the project is subject to the exceptional design requirements. Just a few things to note. The applicant is modernizing the house and putting in matching front door and garage doors with windows. They're going to have the horizontal slat guardrails at the front and the rear of the home. They're simplifying the window language, which right now is a little bit of a mix of everything. They're also providing indoor-outdoor flow from common areas to really make the home usable in a way that it currently isn't. They've also provided a landscape plan that would be implemented as part of the project. As I noted before, there is a parking exception, and based on comments made in previous public comment, I want to be clear on what this means for this project. There is one code compliant space in the parking garage, and there will be a second space, but it will be located in the front yard setback. Our code requires that second off-street space not be in the setback. However, given the siting of the garage, that's not feasible. So we have included findings to locate that second space. So there will be tandem spaces, and this parking space is fully compliant in terms of size and width. It's 8.5 feet by 19 feet in depth. You have received some additional correspondence, which I sent to you about 20 minutes prior to the commission meeting commencing. So there's actually been in total 2 correspondences received regarding this project scope. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15303. And with that, we are recommending approval of the project with that additional condition related to the stairs. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. The property owner is also the project designer. He is a professional engineer, and I'm sure if you have technical questions, he can also answer that for you.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions of staff before we turn it to the project applicant for their presentation? Okay. Seeing none, why don't we go ahead, Chris, and is the project applicant homeowner on the line wishing to give a presentation?
I see Brian in the attendees list. Brian, if you want to raise your hand, we can promote you to a speaker.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. Now's your time to speak.
Oh, I guess I wasn't quite prepared for a presentation. I thought Anne was handling it for me. She did a great job, by the way. Thank you, Anne. Appreciate it.
Oh, great.
It's nice to see your face after talking to you so much. So yeah, you know, we bought our house in July. We're looking to you know, make it into a home for us and make it into, as Anne said, a little more usable for our family and what we want our family to be. We wanted to try and use the character of the existing house as much as possible. As such, we're trying to maintain that the level that we're raising up is going to be the main livable level. It's got beautiful hardwood floors. It's got built-ins. It's got a fireplace, which we are removing because I'm a seismic engineer and I know masonry is not great. So I do understand that risk and approaching and utilizing that. But then the kitchen is not super functional. It's pretty small, and we have some space to be able to expand it. So we're planning to use that off the bat, or like in the back of the house, and then have a nice deck out there to be able to flow into. We do have an existing deck out there, so it's not really changing the deck profile too much. We're just moving it up with the second floor of the home. And then on the bottom floor, we will have an EV charger in the garage. We have an electric car as it is, so we'll be doing that. We're very electric conscious. It's something that we are advocates for as well. And then we're looking to have the main bedroom space on the ground floor, in addition to a laundry room, as Anne pointed, and then have the main suite off the back. With the front elevation, our original plan, I think you all saw, was the stair coming out front, as Anne showed. You know, we walked through this. We've walked almost all of Albany by now, and just saw that as a common theme as far as a straight stair. And we thought it'd be really nice to get another window so that we could get a window into that bedroom that we're planning on the front there, to get light in from two sides. We understand the concerns from the commission. We wanted to try to adhere to those concerns, so we came up with this alternative design that Anne has presented with the switchbacks there. That does meet. It does extend a little bit into that front yard setback, but we think it's a lot less obtrusive than what we had previously as far as the. Sorry, I heard some feedback there. We hope it's potentially an acceptable alteration if the front stair is not accepted by the commission. And as we said, you know, we're just looking at other, you know, our next door neighbors. I don't know if you look at the house at 836, 834. Sorry, my wife is here. I'm asking her.
I think 8-4.
Oh, 840 maybe? 842. That's what it is. 842 right next door. You know, they have a similar front stair. It doesn't come out as far. So just trying to stay within the theme of what it was. But we are also, you know, happy with the design revision, and just, you know, looking for any other feedback you might have. I think that's all the time I need.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then with that, why don't we go ahead and open it up and see if there's any public comment on this item, and then we can turn it back to the commission for discussion. Chris, are there any members of the public?
Yes, we have Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Hi, thank you. I just want to congratulate this project with the electrical vehicle charging station. That's a big thumbs up you got there. I downloaded the front stairs attachment and I looked at the backyard stairs, and I just didn't see a handrail or railing on the left side or one of the sides. It's left side on the blueprints. I just saw like a double rail on the right side. So for safety, I just want to make sure that there's a handrail included on the back staircase. I think it was like page 2 on that front stairs attachment. It just doesn't look like there's a handrail for the back staircase on one side. And also, I'm just wondering if any part of the house is ADA accessible. I see a lot of stairs and a lot of staircases, even the studio in the back. I was just curious, maybe, you could possibly implement some sort of ADA accessible to the home just in case it's sold in the future. And that way it's ADA. I get some feedback back there. Yeah, so those are just my concerns, ADA accessible, and good job for the EV charging station. And the back porch, I was hoping that it was going to be, you're going to use either some 6x6s or some 8x8s, some pressure treated, redwood or something, just make sure it's really sturdy, because we're in an earthquake zone. And you might want to build it as, semi-industrial, make it really safe, really sturdy, use some heavy duty material on that deck. I'm not sure what kind of wood you're planning on using, for the platform to stand on, whether it's, the plastic screw down wood or something. But yeah, good luck. The project looks great. Thank you.
Great. Chris, do we have any other public comments on this item?
Yes, we have one more speaker. I believe it's Mark Wilson. You can have 3 minutes now.
I think this is an old hand. We're just listening to the rest of the meeting. So, sorry, apologies about that.
Okay.
No worries.
Actually, if I have 3 minutes.
No, it's not about this
Okay,
item.
that's it. Okay.
Okay. Okay, there are no other hands up.
Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and close public comment, and we'll turn it back to the commission for deliberations. Do any commissioners want to kick things off here on this item?
I can start.
Okay, Commissioner Jennings.
I wanted to thank the applicant for coming back with the redesign of the front stairs, because I was having a hard time figuring out how we were going to approve the stairs in their original configuration. So I do think that with the redesign, it fits the building much better, and it fits our code more importantly. So I do agree with the proposed condition of approval to work with staff and try to make sure that we're truly complying with the letter of the code with respect to the setback. But aesthetically, I think that design works much better. To address Jeremiah's comments, it looks to me like those back deck stairs have a railing on one side and are against the wall on the other side. Perhaps staff can confirm that, but in any case, I know there will be building code requirements that apply, just as there are building code requirements that apply to make sure that seismic considerations are taken into account, etc. What was the other thing I was going to say? Sorry. With respect to ADA compliance, it's not a requirement for individual private homes. So overall, I thought the scope of the project seems modest. It seems like a fairly simple and attractive design. And again, thank you for coming back with a revision to those stairs.
Any other comments? Commissioner Kent. And then we'll go Commissioner Donaldson afterwards.
Okay, great. This being an exceptional design, this requires a landscape plan. And I don't think we have one. We have a plan that shows plants, but it's not, it's not really a landscape plan. And this is a common theme, I think, in a lot of residential projects we look at that require landscape plans. We just get a plan with plants put on it. Not all of them, but probably half, if not more. And this is an example of that. I think the building, a lot of thought has gone into, and it's quite nice. But on the plan, we have plants that are located 8 foot on center and then mulch in between. The plants that are shown here are not ones that would fit where they put them, and not ones you'd want next to a pathway. Like flannel bush is not something you want to rub up against, but yet they're shown in a spot where they're going to overgrow into the walkway. There's a note that says something to the effect, well, it says species to be selected will be based on availability. Examples include, and it lists several, half a dozen plants. I don't think a planting plan should be done on what's available at the local nursery. It needs to be thought out. And this is just kind of whatever is there we'll buy and put in place. That's not a design. That's just a vegetation plan. There are some inaccuracies here. For instance, they're showing a gate on the south side. I think the gate is just a full hedge. There's no gate there. Is the picket fence staying in or coming out? So there's lots of things I don't, so the landscape plan isn't really a plan is what I'm getting at. It's just a lot of information that's not thought through. So I'm a little disappointed with that. And I would like it if the same amount of information that went into the drafting the building went into the landscape plan, I'd be a little happier. So those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Tomlinson?
Yeah, okay. Let's see, several thoughts. I like the project. I like the design, especially with the revised front stairs. I too had trouble with the long staircase coming down within a foot or so of the sidewalk. We've had some comments in the letters about the deck on the back. I don't think I have any big concerns about that. I think there is an existing deck that's above grade or an entryway on the existing home back there that's up above the ground level, maybe not quite as high. This would be a much bigger deck. And we do have a letter tonight from some neighbors who are concerned about the visibility from this deck into their respective yards. I'm happy to go ahead and approve the project, but I think we should ask the applicant to consider some of the things we've talked about on other projects, which might include either planting pots on the deck to sort of interrupt the visual access into other people's yards, or a solid railing along the sides to again interrupt the line of sight and provide more privacy. I'd be happy if the applicant were to sort of work with staff to address some of those measures. I do think that they do have a right to put the deck up there. I don't think it would be terribly obtrusive. And basically, I support the project, and I'm prepared at some point to move on it. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner McLeod.
I think you're muted, Ian. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said for the most part. I agree the front steps as previously designed, well, it wouldn't have worked in terms of the code, and aesthetically I didn't like it, just bisected the front yard in not a great way. And it was kind of bulky. The new design looks better to me. I think it should be pretty easy to pull it back within the set or the required limit, 6 feet. It does change a few things in the elevations that we don't see, changes door placement, window placement. I trust that will be worked out as it's resubmitted to staff. I do have some concerns, a little bit of a concern about window placement, kind of facade design on the elevations. There's a variety of window types, especially on the north elevation. It just looks really pretty random to me in terms of different types, sizes, placement. That's kind of the weakest side. The other side, the south side is a little more coherent, but there's different levels here and there, different window types all over the place. I would like to see a little more consistency in that. On the front facade with the stairs moving, then some of the windows have changed. I'm not sure how they'll be redone for light in that front bedroom, I guess. You know, overall, I like the design intent. I like the top floor. I like the way it's all open. I think it's going to be a nice space to live in, and I'm happy to support the roof deck. We've approved a number of these. It's well within the setbacks. It's pretty far from the rear property line. Kind of replaces the existing deck. My only other thought, I had other thoughts. You could almost do a wholly internal stairway as an entrance. You know, with an entry door on the ground floor. If I were doing this project, I would really consider something like that, and then allowing inside access to the ground floor from the front, because it is the interior circulation to me looks a little bit, you know, I guess the word is awkward, but on the ground floor, not on the upper floor. But imagine if you're in the front bedroom and you want to go into the backyard, you either have to go through another bedroom, or you go through the garage, 2 doors, or you have to go up the stairs, through the kitchen, across the deck, down again. You know, normally we would try to put some sort of central circulation spine on that ground floor to allow access to the backyard as well. We'll have to leave that up to the applicant, but I would suggest rethinking your interior circulation. But as it stands, I'm happy to, you know, let the project move forward. And, you know, for example, the rear elevation looks the best to me. You know, the windows have some coherence. There's a kind of a general layout that looks good. I think the other facades could use some more work, though. But, you know, I'll leave that up to the clients to work that out, or the applicants, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McLeod. I'm happy to jump in with a couple of initial comments I had too. I also am appreciative of the revised design. I think the revised porch design is significantly better than the one that was originally in the packet. That was my primary concern with this project from the get-go, was sort of the lack of the porch and sort of that abruptness of the door being right at the top of the stair. So I think the turn both solves the stair encroachment issue, but I think is also a much improved design of porches. And obviously front porch design is a big part of the residential design guidelines. So I do think the revised version is much more in compliance with the spirit of sort of a front porch entry for a home like this. I would agree and be supportive of a condition that sort of shaves off that remaining 6 inches for full compliance. I do think there's also some wiggle room, given the slope of this property, to just drop the building even 6 inches. That might be able to offset that need for a riser. I know in the back, there's an elevated crawl space for the rear portion of the building where the front sits at grade. And the building, I know, is being raised, but maybe it can be raised a smidge less so that the stair runs need to be a little bit less. But again, I don't think we need to prescribe that, but I think there's a couple different ways that solution can be achieved while still maintaining that general design approach of sort of turning the stair and having a more gracious front porch landing. That was my primary concern. I do also really appreciate Commissioner Kent's comments about the landscape plan and that this is more of just a planting plan. I don't necessarily know what the right solution here is. You know, I would probably prefer not to have to continue it out, especially given the holidays and sort of delayed hearings. But I would also be supportive of either requiring sort of a landscape plan prepared by a landscape architect to be subsequently submitted as a condition of approval, or having the landscape plan, I don't know if we've ever done this, but having that just come back on the consent calendar for our review at a subsequent hearing date, just so that the design, the architecture of the building can move forward in advance to the building department for their review, while the landscape plan is prepared and subsequently reviewed by us. But I would agree that having something a little more sort of cogent presented as part of the design review process, I would be in support of that as well. The secondary facades, I'm a little less concerned about the window pattern, but I do think, again, the revised front design, front facade makes the window pattern on the front more logical to me as well. So with the revised design and sort of figuring out an approach around the landscape plan, I'd be ready to move this project forward tonight.
I have a suggestion for the landscape plan.
Sure,
Almost
Commissioner
exactly
Kent?
what you said. Either two choices. One, they hire a landscape architect to do the plan and it doesn't come back. Or if the owner wants to do it themselves, then they send back the landscape plan for review.
Okay. I would certainly be supportive of that being the condition of approval, and then it provides the applicant with options of which path they want to move forward with. Okay. Any other comments from commissioners, or would anyone like to propose a motion?
I can propose a motion. At least on my own computer, I'm frozen here. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
We can hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
you look frozen.
But you're in a
Right.
thoughtful position.
All right. Let's see if I can do this. I'll move approval of planning application 20062, design review and parking exception for 838 Talbot, with the conditions of approval as put together in the staff report, plus some additions. One would be that we would like the front stairs to be in full compliance with the setback requirements, which will require modification to the design. We would like to have a landscape plan submitted that has been prepared by a landscape architect, or if the applicant chooses to do their own landscape plan, then it should come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission on a consent calendar. I would like to add a condition asking the applicant to work with the staff on sort of privacy modifications to the rear deck design in response to neighbors' concerns. And I can't put anything together with Ian's comments, and I'm not sure if that's necessary or not. Maybe Ian can add something. That's what I would move approval with those additional commissions or conditions, unless Ian wants to add anything further.
I don't see a need to add conditions, but I think the applicant should still look at the window placement, kind of window design overall. And, they're still free to make some modifications. Staff could look at how that happens. So I don't really have any other conditions I'd like to add. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we'll stick with Commissioner Donaldson's motion. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, with that second, then we'll go ahead. Commissioner McLeod.
I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Jennings.
Yes.
Commissioner Kent.
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I vote yes as well. So that motion passes 5-0. And again, maintain story poles, although I guess with this being a lift, there were not story poles on this project, correct? Okay, based on that. But there still is a 14-day appeal period for the owner and for the public. With that takes us on to our regular agenda here. So item 5, this is general public comment. Do we have any members of the public who are wishing to provide public testimony on issues that are not otherwise agendized on this agenda, but are under the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yes, we have one speaker, Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Hi, good evening. Yes, this is Jeremiah. Just a point of interest on the agenda. Number 4 says consent calendar. If you read it, about halfway through toward the end, it says, there will be no separate discussion on these items unless commission. I think you guys misspelled commission member. It just says CMMISSI when I believe the O is left out. It's just a typo. I was just hoping that the error could be corrected, just so that way, this is Albany, right? So yeah, it would just be nice if commission was spelled correctly. And then also another point of interest would be, to create a policy to where we develop these homes, if we're having additions or new construction, that I would hope there there will be some more ADA advocates out here to make these homes accessible. Because I believe that, you know, if you were to sell a home someday, you might get extra money because your home is ADA accessible. You know, so, you know, ADA people, they have to hunt, they have to look really hard to find homes to buy or purchase or to rent, because nobody's created a policy to where these homes, you know, are ADA accessible. So I would hope sometime in the future we can make some sort of city policy to where, you know, every home in Albany would be ADA accessible, you know, because, oh gosh, when, you know, let's say an ambulance comes in and someone falls down inside the home, how do you expect the ambulance and the paramedics to bring a hospital bed inside a gurney? What are you going to do? Wheel down an injured person down a flight of stairs? I mean, I know that the paramedics would probably carry them at that point, but it just seems kind of like another risk. You got one fireman or one paramedic walking down the stairs backwards, or, you know, so I would just hope that these homes in the future, we can create some sort of policy to where these homes are ADA accessible, because it seems like, you know, we're united against hate right now. And I just want to stand united against hate on ADA. I just would like Albany to be more open to ADA accessible buildings, ADA accessible residences. I understand it's private property, like you said, but, you know, ADA accessible is very important, you know, to get a wheelchair. Because what happens if one of these people breaks their legs? Now they're stuck in a house they can't even enter, you know? So please, let's work on ADA accessibility.
Time's up. I see no other speakers in the audience.
Just want to clarify one thing. The language in question under the consent calendar, commission is used twice. It is spelled correctly, and it is also used grammatically correctly.
Great, thanks for that clarification. All right, with that, then we will go ahead and close public comment since there are no other speakers, and we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action of regularly agendized items. And we do have a few items tonight. First up, we have item 6-1, that's planning application 20-049, design review for a single story addition at 1212 Dartmouth. Staff, do you have a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Once again, this is planning application 20-049, design review for a single story addition at 1212 Dartmouth Street. Some background on the property. The subject property is a 5,000 square foot lot with a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 917 square foot house built in 1947. In 2001, a design review and conditional use permit application was filed by the current property owners for a 2-story addition. At the time, staff recommended denial without prejudice due to design concerns. No revisions were submitted to submitted in response to the commission's comments. Formal action was not taken and the project scope was abandoned. Here's the street view of the property as it sits today. And then project requests. The applicant is seeking design review approval for a 583 square foot single story addition to the existing primary dwelling. The addition is proposed to accommodate a new master suite, family room, and laundry room. The expansion to the primary dwelling is proposed along the southern portions of the subject parcel. And here's an existing elevation on from Dartmouth Street looking at the property. And here's what's proposed. Along with this project scope, an attached ADU is proposed. The project scope includes the demolition of the existing 2-car garage and the construction of a 504 square foot attached accessory dwelling unit located on the northern side of the lot with frontage along Dartmouth Street. Per section 2020-080 of the Albany Municipal Code and per Government Code section 65852.2, the ADU component of this project will be ministerial. The ADU component of this project is exempt from commission review. However, we provided this information regarding the ADU to illustrate the context as to why the primary dwelling addition is designed as presented before you tonight. And here's an exhibit provided by the project architect. You'll see the ADU fronts Dartmouth Street here, and the actual addition to the primary dwelling is on the southern portion of the parcel right here. And then the house is located on the southeast corner of Dartmouth Street and Talbot Avenue and has a Dartmouth address. The front entry porch is also located on Dartmouth Street. The zoning code indicates that for corner lots, the smaller dimension of the lot with street frontage shall be considered the front of the property, while the side with the longer dimension is considered the side setback area. With that in mind, staff has determined that the portion of the property fronting Talbot Avenue is the front of the home with respect to compliance with setback requirements. And to just illustrate that, the front entry porch is located here, fronting Dartmouth Street. However, per the zoning code definition for corner lots, we've evaluated the project based on the Talbot side being the front of the parcel. And then here's just an excerpt from that definition, the key part being that the front of the corner lot shall be considered the smaller dimension of the lot, and that the side the side the longer dimension of the lot. Parking, there are 2 off-street parking spaces provided in the attached garage. As mentioned before, the applicant is proposing to demolish the garage and relocate the off-street parking to the Talbot side of the property. The applicant is proposing 2 off-street parking spaces in an open side-by-side configuration, clear from the front setback area of 15 feet. With that, staff has not received any correspondences regarding this project proposal. The project is categorically exempt per section 15.303 of CEQA. And recommendation, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review the project request and provide feedback to staff. Draft conditions of approval are provided if the commission decides to take action. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions of staff before we turn it to the project applicant for their presentation?
I had a question.
Oh, sure, Commissioner Jennings.
Yeah, Chris, I was just wondering if you could speak to whether staff had any particular concerns or particular issues on which you were seeking feedback. Seeing that the recommendation from staff was not one for approval, I'm just curious if there was anything that you were concerned about in the proposal in particular.
I can answer that. Really what we wanted to get was just an affirmative determination from the commission on the setbacks, being that it is a corner lot, because the parking is proposed to be accessed from the Talbot side, which would technically make that the front yard if we use that lot corner definition. And so I think design-wise, there's nothing, no refinement that we've recommended as part of this. We just wanted to make sure that, our interpretation is consistent with how the commission would interpret it. We have included the findings and conditions if you feel comfortable taking action tonight, so this would not have to come back to you at a future date.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I have just one quick clarification. They're removing the curb cut. They're going to patch and replace the curb cut on Dartmouth and then do a new curb cut on Talbot. I think the drawing, one of them, it shows that, but doesn't really call it out. So I just want to make that explicit, that they're going to repair and remove the curb cut on Dartmouth.
Yes, that's indeed the case. We could also add that as a condition of approval if you just want to solidify that, but that's generally.
Yeah, absolutely, because they don't, on the proposed site plan, they don't actually note that. They should note it on the plan, and they should also note that it's the new curb cut on their plan. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, just technical points, but it needs to be clear.
Sure.
Any other questions of staff?
Commissioner Donaldson here. I had the same concerns exactly that Commissioner McLeod had. I was wondering about the curb cut on Dartmouth. And I would like to have a condition that be reconstructed so we get extra parking spaces there. Thank you.
With that, then why don't we go ahead and turn it over to the project applicant for their presentation.
see. I'm not seeing Michael Roberts. Oh, okay, Michael, you can speak. You have 3 minutes starting now, or 5 minutes rather.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. Thank you for your time tonight in reviewing our project. Our project was pretty much initiated by the need of my mother-in-law to live closer to us and have pretty much 24-hour attendance or closeness, proximity to myself and my wife, and that's what kind of got the project going. We plan on having her live in the ADU. We really like the job that Randy Stockwell, the architect, did with the design. We think it works with the existing architecture and fits in with the neighborhood well. We've gotten great support from our neighbors, adjacent to our property here, and they're very supportive and enthusiastic for the project. The ADU, while it's not, completely ADA accessible, it will be kind of enable elder mobility. It's one level. There'll be a ramping up to the front stoop there, and so it'll be convenient for someone who might be impaired. Myself and Randy Stockwell are on the line here to answer any questions regarding the curb cut. Yes, plan on removing the existing curb cut and replacing it with a straight curb and making a 12-foot curb cut on Talbot Street.
Great, thank you. Why don't we go ahead and open it up to public comment, if there is any public comment, and then we will turn it back to the commission. Staff, do we have any public comment on this item?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, then if there is no public comment on this item, we will go ahead and close public comments. Do any commissioners want to kick off discussion? If not,
if no one else wants to speak,
okay.
I'm prepared to move on this project. I think it's a good project, and I don't have any objections to it at all. I'll make a motion. We'll see what happens here.
Although, Commissioner Donaldson, just before you jump in, the only comment that I was going to chime in on, and I absolutely support this project. I actually think the revised project incorporating the ADU breaks up the facade along Dartmouth, actually as a improvement, in my opinion, architecturally from the existing condition. My only one comment would be with relocating the parking onto Talbot is what I would like to suggest a condition of approval to maybe include like permeable pavers or something along those lines. Just often when we've got two side by side, basically a parking pad rather than enclosed parking, given the need for it to be out of the setback, there ends up being a lot of concrete without any landscaping. And I do think in this area, it's a pretty well, sort of a pretty permeable neighborhood, for lack of a better term, with a lot of sort of front landscaping or, lawns, that sort of thing. So that would be the only suggestion I would have, just sort of break up an otherwise sort of solid concrete parking pad and incorporate some sort of permeable pavers of some sort. But Commissioner McLeod, you're raising your hand also.
Yeah, I support the project. I think overall it looks great. I guess, the only thought I had on the front facade is that the storage room door almost looks like an entry door. It looks a little confusing to me. And then it's funny, the main entrance to the front house or the main house looks like the side door or kind of a side door porch. So there's just some little, I don't know how you deal with that. I don't think it's anything to make a condition of approval for, but it just seems in the design to be a little off or a little odd. And my only other thought is, going back to some of the other comments from Jeremiah and others, it would be great if this were an all-electric project. They have to remove the forced air gas heater anyway. They're relocating the gas meter. I think it would behoove the applicant to go all electric. Probably save you money. The equipment is much better for heating and hot water heating now, and cooking also. So I would encourage that. you know, along the lines with the other projects, they should all be going all electric, in my opinion. But this seems like a great opportunity if you're replacing the equipment, a lot of the equipment anyway, to go all electric. And, you know, the other issue we're having these days is with fireplaces. You know, we had like a wood smoke day or days because of wood burning from fireplaces. I mean, it's probably not in the scope of this work, but it's not a bad idea to remove fireplaces, both for that reason and for seismic hazards. So that's about it. Thank you.
Any other comments on this one before we let Commissioner Donaldson lead the way with the motion?
Well, I'm going to chime in on your suggestion about permeable pavers. The way I understand them, it's quite a lens you got to create. You know, almost 12 inches of gravel to really make it officially permeable, so your water doesn't pond and create all kinds of issues. And that's a lot of excavation around the tree. But I do like the idea of a texture breakup. I mean, concrete pavers or something would definitely soften that massive concrete. So if your idea was kind of pavers as opposed to concrete, then I'm supporting it. But if it's pushing a pervious paving system on them, I think that's a big deal, and I'm not
sure. Yeah, I was more talking about breaking up sort of the massive concrete to bring some softness and a little bit more texture rather than a solid hardscape. So yeah, it doesn't need to be an official system.
It's a great idea, yeah.
Okay, and I'm fine letting sort of staff work and giving the applicant some latitude on exactly how to execute that, but something that's other than just the massive concrete.
Okay.
If others are amenable to that condition.
Okay. All right. Okay, I think I can try here. I'll move approval of planning applications 20049, design review for a single-story addition at 1212 Dartmouth, with the additional condition that the surface of the driveway be modified so that the concrete, if it is concrete, has some texture and variation, and would like to ask the applicant to pay attention to the comments that the commission has made with respect to going all electric and with respect to the fireplace and the chimney, but those aren't mandatory. So anyway, with that, I'll approve as proposed in the staff report and with the conditions of approval therein, plus the one additional condition with respect to the driveway.
I can second.
Okay, great. And with that second, then we'll go ahead and call the vote. Commissioner McLeod. I saw an aye, even though you were muted. Commissioner McLeod, aye.
Keep muting myself. Yes.
Commissioner Kent.
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings.
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that motion passes 5-0. And with that, we will go ahead and move on to item 6-2 on our regular agenda, which is a parking exception to allow parking in the required front yard at 938 Pomona. And this is, I believe, a non-action item, just feedback request from the commission, if I'm correct.
Yes. Good evening, commissioners. Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director. I'll be making this presentation. I'd like to begin by sharing my screen. Bear with me a moment. There we go. So this is a little bit of an unusual application. The subject property is at 938 Pomona. And it's a single-family, standard Albany single-family residence. It has a shared driveway on the south side of the parcel and a garage in the rear yard on the south west corner of the property. What makes this unusual is it's a parking exception request, although there are no changes to the residence as proposed. As you well know, typically parking exceptions are considered in situations where an addition is being made to the home and there are no other alternatives to providing additional parking that is currently triggered by the code. So this, the applicant's seeking this parking exception in order to allow the creation of a parking space in the front yard, and which is within the purview of the commission. Additionally, if the commission were to ultimately take action of approval on this, then the city staff would approve an encroachment permit to allow widening of the neighboring driveway, so that a vehicle could have access to the proposed parking space. This is a street view image with the arrow showing where the proposed parking space would be located. And then the curb cut widening would essentially be where those two traffic cones are located. And this is the other side of the front elevation. This shows the existing shared driveway, and in the distance there on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the existing driveway. So pursuant to our code, there are basically four findings that the commission would need to make in order to approve this. To summarize the findings that are here on the screen. And the first one is really the most critical one in this case, which is the determination that parking in the rear or side yard is not feasible. In this case, the applicant believes that it's not feasible. There have been some issues with getting through the driveway, and damage has been done reportedly to the home in the past. And in order to avoid that in the future, they're looking to be able to park in the front yard. The other findings are a little bit more straightforward. The space does appear to meet minimum dimensions. We haven't solicited a survey, but staff did do the basic measurements and able to confirm the basic minimum dimensions. If it were to be created, the third finding could be made that once a vehicle is parked properly in the new space, it would not be within, it would not cross a property line, it wouldn't be within a foot of the sidewalk, and it wouldn't create a visual obstruction that would impact the safety of a nearby intersection. And then finally, with the other finding would be that the parking is designed to minimize aesthetic and noise impacts. In many respects, this parking would not be all that much different than what a lot of people do already in Albany, which is to park in their driveway in the front yard. Nonetheless, if the commission were inclined ultimately to approve this, perhaps a condition of approval regarding some landscaping would be something the commission might want to do. We have received some correspondence regarding this proposal, 3 emails to date regarding the request. One expressing support, and 2 were opposed to the request. And then shortly before the start of tonight's meeting, additional correspondence was received in opposition to the request. That was provided to the commission, and about, I think, just a few minutes before the start of the meeting, and it also has been posted on the webpage. And I wanted to address one of the issues that was raised in this most recent correspondence. We first heard about this through a telephone call this afternoon, that the applicant of this, the owner of this particular property at 938 also owns a property at 930 Evelyn, and a new front yard parking space has been created there recently. It's in terms of code requirements, it's a similar situation to the request that the commission is discussing this evening. So this came as a little bit of a surprise. It was not approved. The front yard parking has not been approved by the city. We did issue a permit to a contractor for sidewalk and curb cut repair. But in doing that, we expressly stated that the driveway widening was not part of the permit. Because this is kind of late breaking news, we haven't gotten to the bottom of exactly what happened here. But ultimately, we would need to have both properties, if the commission were inclined that this is something you might want to, might be able to approve, both properties would have to go through a similar process in order to do that.
Sorry, Jeff, just sorry to interrupt, but the screen said 930. Could you go back one slide? It says 930 Evelyn on the top and then 930 Pomona below. Oh. Which one was it?
It's I'm sorry. Too many things in our minds. 930 Pomona.
Pomona. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that correction. And then again, just if and when the time comes for consideration of approval, this would be exempt from CEQA. as an existing minor alteration of an existing facility. Our recommendation in the staff report was to provide direction. We did provide some findings and conditions of approval if the commission were inclined to find it acceptable. We've processed this application in a little bit of a different way than we normally would, and that is that we took in the application, and well, we actually haven't taken in the application. I should correct myself. We after discussions with the applicant, given that there's quite a possibility here that the commission may not find this an acceptable approach, we did not charge the application fee at this time. If there is an inclination to allow it to move forward, then we would need to formalize the application and payment fees and so forth. And we could do that either by coming back to the commission, or we could do that as a condition of approval, either way. Again, normally we don't do this, but given that it's a unique application and we're kind of raising a new question for the commission that I don't think has been asked in many, many years, if ever, and to my knowledge, we thought it was a little bit better approach to give the applicant a shot at a chance to produce this, discuss this with the commission. At this time, be happy to answer commission questions, and we can check in to see whether the applicant would be interested in addressing the commission as well. I'm not sure where he stands on that, but I did assure him that he'd have opportunity if he wished. So thank you very much. I will stop the screen share and be happy to try to answer your questions.
So I just had a quick question, and I know this was in the staff report, but just to clarify, so the driveway that's along the south side is a shared driveway. And can you confirm what the dimension is of the that curb cut and of that driveway?
I didn't measure the curb cut itself, but the driveway between structures, between the projected windows on each side, is 8 feet 6 inches.
Okay, and so that is to the narrowest point between where the sort of bay projections are.
Right, that where the mirrors would clip or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, 8.6, great, thank you. And just to confirm, the city standard that we have in new projects for a code compliant driveway of that sort of thing is, what's the dimension again? It's
8'6".
8'6". Okay, great. And I believe we had one of these the other day on Curtis, where there was a similar question about a sort of an existing shared driveway and the dimension being relevant to this. Okay, great, thank you for that clarification. Do any other commissioners have any clarifying questions? All right, seeing none, then why don't we go ahead and give the property owner an opportunity to speak. Chris, if you could let the property owner speak.
So Chris, if you could let Henry speak. I'm not, we were exchanging about how to raise hands, so he may not be raising his hand, but I do see him there as an attendee. Thank you. Go ahead, Henry. You'll need to unmute your computer, and then you can go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the south side shared driveway, when you're pulling in and trying to get to the back of the garage, which is too small to house my car in anyway, you have to navigate. It's not a direct shot back. So what happens all the time is you have to start to wedge your car back and forth, and this is when I start to damage the two homes, because they have the punch outs in the bedrooms of 940 and the living room of 938. So often the case, I'm spending a lot of time parking and I'm damaging the two structures constantly. I cannot access it at all at night. The visibility is bad, and my lights wake up the neighbor, the 90-year-old woman next door, when I'm trying to spend 5 to 15 minutes to get back in the back of my driveway. So it's becoming impossible, and even during the daytime is as well. There's been 2 incidents where I got stuck and I couldn't even get out of the car. And if there was an emergency, the fire department, I guess I'd just die in my car. The house is 110 years old, approximately, and I love the aesthetic value of it, and I want to keep it, and I don't want to alter those punch outs, and the neighbor next door wouldn't. The neighbor next door does not use the driveway at all for primarily the same reason as well. So I was hoping that I can put a off-street parking to the north of my house, which would take up very little appearance of the house, the structure, and also do extensive landscape with an architect to have the commission and planning approve to compensate, and I think it would blend in quite well. I would match a lot of homes on Pomona that park this way, and particularly I would blend in right with the neighbor to the right of mine, the house to the north, 936. I'm still leaving off-street parking of around 20 feet out front, so the public would have, and then again, I can be able to park, and I would not be a safety factor or anything like that. And I do believe in, I'm 60 years old and I'm getting older. It also really adds a nice pad as my knees are going out to get into my house. There's only 2 steps into my front door versus 8 steps if I ever could get, to the back garage and then try to get up to the stairs. So as the future goes for an older person in Albany, why I moved here, this would be very appropriate. And I don't want to change the size of my house or do anything like that. I like a small home, and that's why I moved to Albany, so I can grow old here and walk around. So I think for an ADA situation, it's perfect. For electrical vehicle hookup in the future, which I'd like to buy a Tesla next year, it would all accommodate because electrical power is right there as well. There's no power in the back. So for a minimal cost, I would still, not taking parking away from the public, and then I'd be creating a small space out front. So I think, and I meet the requirements, for everything. And if I was able to get to my backyard, I'd have to take out like 3 heritage trees that have been in Albany for 80 years. And I have a very, very small backyard once I get back there. And so I can't use my garage. That's a big expense. And it would take away from my living space outside if I did try to manage to get to the back anyway. I think it's a non-feasible situation where it's not convenient to back down and continue to damage the homes and my car. So I think I fit the requirement, and I was hoping the commission, the planning would work with me on landscaping and allow me to have an off-street parking. I do want to comment about the driveway down the street, that I will work with Jeff to rectify that issue. I hired a contractor that was doing the city work, and I was there that day when they're replacing sidewalks and driveways, and it was an opportunity time to put a house down, a curb cut down there, and the city inspector said it was okay. And then the day after the pour was done, an Albany inspector came by and said everything was fine. But nevertheless, I'm not placing blame. I will do what Jeff wants me to do to correct the issue down the street. It was not intentional, and it was just a little mishap of widening that driveway just a couple feet. So please.
Great.
Okay, time's up.
Okay. Thank you. And why don't we, before we turn it back to the commission for discussion, see if there is any public comment on this item. Chris, are there any folks of the public?
Yes, excuse me. I see 2 hands up. The first one is Christina Ratcliffe. You have 3 minutes, Christina, starting now.
Hi, thank you very much. Hope you can hear me now.
Mm-hmm.
First, I want to apologize for submitting my letter so late. I actually thought today was Tuesday. Also, apologies to Henry and Nancy for not talking to you sooner. It has taken me some time to look at this and come to a decision. So I want to express my opposition to this request for the front yard parking exception on 938 Pomona. I don't believe the findings can be made to support this decision. And further, I believe it harms the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood and goes against city policies to reduce car dependence. So one of the findings that the commission has to make is that parking within a dwelling, a garage, a carport, or other structure in the rear or side yard is not feasible or will disrupt landmark trees or severely restrict private outdoor living space on the site. I don't believe this can be made. There is an existing shared driveway and a garage that has been used for many years. There are no trees involved and private outdoor space will not be impacted. Mr. Schiff maintains that he cannot get his cars in the driveway. My family and I have lived with a shared driveway at 934 Pomona for 20 years. The commission has just recently approved a design review application for us for an addition to our home. The project was designed to respect not only the existing design of the home, but to maintain the shared driveway, and then thus the front yard will be a landscape and welcoming area and not a parking space. Our shared driveway has been used on a daily basis between 934 and 932 Pomona for 20 years without incident. I included in the letter I sent, in the email I sent, a photo from today showing my shared driveway, which is the 8.5 foot width with 2 4-door cars parked there, a Leaf, plugged in electric Leaf, and my neighbor's car, which I believe is an Acura 4-door. Many homes in Albany have shared driveway or no driveway and have for over 100 years. And I'm concerned that should the Planning Commission approve this request, it would set a precedent that would change the neighborhood character of Albany. And one of the findings D is any required off-street parking spaces which are permitted in front yard areas are designed to minimize aesthetic intrusion upon adjacent property. This home has a shared driveway on the south side and a driveway exists for 936 Pomona on the north side. Creating a parking space in the front of the home would eliminate a large portion of the very small front yard, resulting in a 12-foot wide swath of cement between the homes at 936 and 938 Pomona. And I think this is aesthetically inappropriate for the neighborhood. I also question the applicant's assertion that Solano Avenue businesses impact parking on our street. I've lived here for 20 years and only a handful of times when parking was unavailable on our street, mostly on a Solano stroll days, which is to be expected. Mr. Schiff owns a home at 930 Pomona, and we have talked about the widening there, that home has an entire front yard that is paved over and is a parking lot for 2 cars. I don't think this adds to the aesthetic of the neighborhood. And I fear that this is what is occurring at the 938 location. The Planning Commission is reviewing the
Time's up. We have a next speaker, Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Okay, thank you. I looked at 930 Pomona, and I don't think it's a shared driveway, but they have a really big cement area. Looks like they could park 2 cars at 930 Pomona. I'm looking at 938 Pomona on Google Maps, and it looks like there's a tree in front, and obviously that tree is causing some damage to the sidewalk. I don't know if this is an old Google image or not. Magnolia tree looks like. There's some damage to the sidewalk there because of the roots. So it just seems like he's trying to make his property look better. There's some cement square blocks on the planter area between the sidewalk and the street, kind of a makeshift driveway. It looks like there's some tire marks on the grass where the car is parked on the grass, and it already looks kind of like a parking space anyway, just unofficial. But I think it's a good idea to make it a parking space because, you know, parking is a premium, and a shared driveway. I've never actually really noticed that in Albany, but yeah, shared driveway is kind of interesting. It's really, really small. And I'm all about ADA accessibility and everything like that. So I just think it would be a good idea Because right now it looks like the car parks there. And well, you mentioned electric vehicle, so it's not going to be dropping oil or gas or anything straight to the dirt and harming the ground. I just think it would just make the property almost look a little bit better. And, you know, so this homeowner owns his own property. And I believe the homeowner might have a right to do whatever pronoun the person goes by, you know, to add a parking space in the front yard. I mean, if you look at 930 Pomona, they've got planter boxes, you know, so a car can't really just park there. They can move the planter boxes, but they have a lot of cement in front of 930 Pomona, and it looks really good. It looks like there's some extra, you know, the holidays are coming up, and this homeowner probably just wants a family member to be able to park their car. I mean, it's a really, we got to make some improvements on parking. And this whole meeting, it kind of sounds like, you know, parking is an issue in Albany. And if we're creating an off-street parking space that's ADA approved, I would think creating an off-street parking space would be okay. I mean, the other homeowner just...
Time's up. Oops, let's see. We have one more speaker, Stuart Guterman. You have 3 minutes starting now. Stuart, you can speak if you wish to.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for taking my opinion on this. I'm waiting for something else on the agenda, but this got to me. I think front yard parking is a very bad idea. It is a terrible aesthetic. I used to live in the Cayuga area of San Francisco before I moved here to Albany. And one of the problems we had were people parking their cars on their front lawns because they would take the garage and fill it up and make it into a living space. The area started to look like a parking lot, which invited crime. It looked terrible and was detrimental to the property values in the neighborhood. If something could be done in this case to make it temporary so that this house owner could do it on a temporary basis, that when he is no longer owner of the house, that is rescinded, I may say, okay. But otherwise, aesthetically, it is not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other speakers.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if there are no other members of public comment, we will go ahead and close public comment and turn it back to the commission for discussion. Do any commissioners want to kick things off here? Commissioner Donaldson.
Okay. Let's see. I'm sure I can't make the finding, the first finding here. We do have a shared driveway. It's 8.5 feet wide, and it's workable. I think we have a strong testimony from one person tonight, Christina, that shows experience using such a driveway for a long time, and so I think that to allow this to move forward would be a serious compromise to our design review guidelines. We should discourage parking in the front yard as much as we possibly can. We do make exceptions from time to time, and most of the times those are in a driveway that already exists, as was the case earlier tonight. I don't know, it may be somewhat relevant. We had testimony from the applicant or from other sources about how this was an anachronistic design built for the era of Model Ts with a narrow driveway. I've heard that before, and these sometimes do look like narrow driveways. And I was wondering, well, maybe our 8.5-foot standard isn't appropriate, or maybe it needs to be looked at. So I thought I would just do some research on how wide cars are. And I can report that a Model T was 66 inches wide, 5.5 feet. A very large Ford F-150 model, current model, very large vehicle today, is only 6.6 feet wide. So just a little bit over a foot more than a Model T. Model A was an inch or so wider than a Model T. My small Chevrolet is only 3.5 inches wider than a Model T was. So cars maybe are bigger. They're certainly more modern and more comfortable and all of that. But I think that our 8.5-foot width is just fine. It is workable, it is usable, and I simply couldn't make the finding necessary to allow this to go forward. So. I think that's what I have to say right now. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Donaldson. Commissioner Jennings?
So I basically agree with everything Commissioner Donaldson said with respect to that finding. But I did just want to make sure I understand the scope of what the applicant is proposing. I don't know if it was just me, but I was having a really hard time hearing his discussion, his presentation. So Jeff, I was hoping you could just clarify. It is part of, well, first off, is the shared driveway that 938 Pomona has access to, is that on the 938 property, or is it on the neighboring property, or does it overlap both?
I believe it overlaps both, but we have not requested a formal survey, so I couldn't be sure of that. But it almost certainly is down somewhere in the middle of the driveway.
Okay. And was the applicant talking about removing that existing curb cut and converting the existing driveway to something else, or?
It would essentially be widening the existing curb cut. The existing curb cut aligns with the existing driveway on the north side of the property.
Sorry, I meant on the south side. Are they talking about removing the existing curb cut on the south side? Mm-hmm. Okay. And it sounds like if it's shared with the neighboring property, they may not even have, the legal ability to do that. I mean, I can't imagine being able to make the findings here, certainly not without, some kind of proposal to remove the existing curb cut. It doesn't make sense to me that we would have two curb cuts for a single family home like this, especially where, we routinely grant approvals for driveways that are, this wide, that comply with code. I'm sympathetic to the homeowner's desire to have a more convenient parking space, but it typically, when we do grant exceptions for parking in the front yard, it is typically because there is some kind of change proposed to the existing home that triggers a need for either adding a parking space or bringing the home into compliance with current parking requirements. And then in looking at the constraints that exist on the site, it requires a factual determination that it really isn't feasible to put that additional or required parking somewhere else. This seems like just a completely, it's not required, it's just a completely discretionary request for essentially additional parking on site. And I don't think we have any precedent for it. I don't think it's a good precedent to set. And people keep throwing around the term ADA compliance, which I'm taking exception to in this respect, just because I don't think there has been any representation that what is being proposed would be an ADA compliant parking space, or that the home itself is ADA compliant. So it's like, please, let's just take that out of this conversation. It really has nothing to do with what's before us. Yeah, I don't, based on what we've seen, I don't see how we could make the findings. If the applicant wanted to work with staff and get creative and find some other ways to perhaps make modifications to the site that would, change our analysis, I think we would be willing to consider that. But based on what's before us tonight, I just don't think this is something I could support.
Do any other, Commissioner McLeod?
You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I think Commissioner Jennings just hit it on the head when she said it's basically a discretionary request for an additional parking space. I don't think I could support the findings either, especially when the driveway width is basically our standard requirement, minimum requirement. Granted, maybe it's not convenient, but it would meet our legal code today as a standard driveway. So I don't see how we can actually then grant another curb cut. And I think having 2 curb cuts in front of a residence is really something to be discouraged or just not allowed at all. Granted, it might be 1.5 curb cuts, but I don't think that would be appropriate either. And I think putting the car right in front of, basically in front of the living room window, I don't think that's going to look terribly good either. I mean, almost always when we grant a parking exception, it's on the driveway in front of a garage or on an existing driveway. So I can't really support this application either. Thanks.
Commissioner Kent, did you have any comments? Or okay.
Well, I'm trying, I really want to support it, but I'm having trouble too, because I can really sympathize with the issue of having to back out of that driveway, it being so narrow. I mean, that's difficult. But I see a lot of driveways that are that narrow, but mostly they're dedicated to one unit, and so they don't drive it. They just park in front of the house, and they don't use the driveway. You can see that all along the other side of the street. Now, in the case where they're shared driveways, I lived in a house once that had a shared driveway in Albany, and we didn't use it. It was very difficult. The neighbor too, that's the first time I've heard of a success story with these. It's usually much more contentious, so that was really interesting. But in her lot, looking at it on the map, it doesn't look like you can turn around either, so they must be backing out successfully. But I think it does require a bit of skill to back out 50 feet that narrow and not going off, especially at night in the dark. That's a lot. So I could justify that you can't use that lot, that parking stall. And but then then I'm really troubled with creating a precedent that all of a sudden everybody is parking when they have a parking stall in front of their house. They are using it that way. Very few are driving to the back. The 930 Evelyn, or sorry, 930 Pomona picture you showed, that's exactly what we don't want, that sea of concrete. And that's what I'm afraid we are encouraging. And I thought maybe there's a way of designing it where it's 2 strips of concrete, and so it's not a mass, and you have planting down there, so it could be a much softer look. I'm still troubled with the precedent setting, but I would be willing to, in this case, see that that the driveway is untenable, and I could probably vote for this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Kent. I'll just chime in with my final thoughts. I don't want to take up any additional time here, but my thoughts are pretty well aligned with what Commissioner Donaldson and Jennings and McLeod spoke of earlier in terms of struggling to be able to support the findings for this. I very much am in agreement with the comments that Ms. Radcliffe down the block made in terms of this being precedent setting. This building is in a series of 4 similar buildings that appear to have been built in sort of mirroring images with the shared driveway. I do think that's an important architectural character. I completely understand the impracticalities of some of the narrower driveways, but I do think this is not a unique situation. This is not like the one-off scenario in Albany where it really is a property hardship issue, sort of analogous to a variance type request, even though this wouldn't be a variance request. I think this is a very common scenario in Albany. I think again, if that was different, I would have very different feelings on this. But I think the fact that this is such a common feature in Albany, it's part of part of the downside of having really, buildings built really closely together while still being of a detached nature. We kind of, I think, always struggle in Albany with this conflict between being detached single family homes, but also being a somewhat dense sort of urban village feeling here. And I think that's the trade-off, is that, we're not a community of 16-foot wide garage doors where you park side by side with huge curb cuts. And I think we all really value that architectural character that comes as a result of having really narrow driveway accesses and garage accesses, because you do get a different architectural character, that more bungalow character, sort of that older housing typology. And I think when we start sort of letting people dedicate the front of their homes to parking, we do start to sort of deteriorate that quality. So I do have concerns. I mean, I have this similar situation at my house. My garage door is too narrow and my driveway is too narrow to really park a car in it. And so I park on the street. And sometimes I have to park down the block. And that is, I think, sort of part of the sort of expectation of, again, the benefits of living in a community that is highly walkable and that's desirable and where there are a lot of people around. So again, I would not be supportive of making those findings. Certainly, I think if this property owner does have a disability where there's some unique personal needs, I would certainly be very supportive of that individual engaging with the city to see if I don't personally know what sort of the color curb programs are in the city, but if there is a scenario where one could apply for a color curb in front of their home, if they do have a disability placard, I would certainly be very supportive of those types of alternatives in order to accommodate somebody's individual needs, but not necessarily making architectural changes in perpetuity to sort of the curb cuts and the infrastructure of the home. So I would put that out there as probably the best next step if that is a pragmatic or if that is a reality of this property owner's personal circumstances. So that wraps all of my comments. Are there any final thoughts? Otherwise, hopefully that gave planning staff some general direction from the commission. Okay. Seeing no other next steps, staff, do you guys have any follow-up questions for the commission, or do you have what you need from us on this item?
I think we have what we need from you. Appreciate it. I'll touch base with the applicant tomorrow, and we'll see what we do next.
Okay, great. With
you.
that, then that closes item 6-2 on our agenda, and we're moving on to item 6-3 on our agenda. This is planning application 20-019, density bonus and design review for a new 14-unit apartment building at 423 Evelyn Avenue. And we'll turn it over to staff for a presentation. And that's Jean Eisberg.
Yeah, Jean Eisberg will be presenting the staff report for this project.
Okay, good evening, Chair Waddy, members of the commission. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so this is a public hearing for 423 Evelyn Avenue. You may recall that you had a study session on this project in July. The site location is between Evelyn and the Ohlone Greenway. You can see the BART aerial tracks just north of Brighton. The site has a general plan designation of high density residential, an R3 zoning designation. It's just over 9,000 square feet. And there's currently a 2-story, 4-unit structure on the property, which was built in 1960. There are a number of legal nonconformities related to the site. The biggest issue is that it's non-conforming with respect to lot width. It's a very narrow lot, which means that the existing driveway backup distance is quite shallow and non-conforming. It also is non-conforming in terms of bike parking and open space. So the request is a recommendation by the commission to the council, and that's because the city council approves projects that are requested under state density bonus law. Just a couple photos of the site. This is the frontage on Evelyn Avenue, the existing building that would remain. And behind that building, this is looking east towards the BART tracks and the Ohlone Greenway. And this is where the new building would be located. So then looking west, the back of the existing units to remain, and then looking west towards the site, you can see a bit of a grade change, chain link fence looking west from the Greenway. So when you saw the site plan in July, the proposal was to place the building on the rear of the lot and reconfigure the parking so you'd have 6 spaces in between the 2 units. Based on the feedback from the commission, the applicants redesigned the project to remove all of the parking, both the existing parking and the parking that would typically be proposed for the project, and replace that with common open space. That also means that they no longer need the vehicle driveway for access to site. So instead, the driveway is reconfigured to just allow pedestrian and bicycle access into the building. Another key change is that the building shifted slightly to the west, and so we now have a conforming rear yard setback. A couple other key changes are additional balconies on either end of the building and Juliet balconies on the long faces north and south, and additional windows on those north and south elevations in response to feedback from the commission. There's more of a point-by-point response to the commission's comments in the staff report. So the proposed project is to add 14 multifamily units to the site, bringing the total number of units to 18. In the new building, there would be 1 very low income unit and 1 low income unit meeting the requirements of the city's inclusionary housing requirement and state density bonus law. So as I mentioned, the proposal is to remove the existing parking lot. No vehicle parking is proposed either for the existing or the new units, to redesign that driveway to serve bikes and pedestrians only, and to create that common open space between the buildings. There's also common access to the Ohlone Greenway on the north side of the building via the side yard. Bike parking is provided inside the building, 35 protected spaces where 14 are required. And this includes, these are double stacked bike storage and 3 at grade long tail bike spaces. And this would serve tenants of both buildings. So the tenants of the units in the existing building would be able to access the lobby and bike room. In terms of open space, the previous request included very minimal amount of open space, just the ground floor patios. And so in this proposal, we again have those ground floor patios for these 2 units on the ground floor, this common open space that would be accessible to tenants in both units, a new open space behind the existing building, which would be used by that ground floor unit. That does not count towards the usable open space requirement for the new project. And then balconies, again, on the east and west facades for 6 of the units. The Juliet balconies are too shallow and would also not count towards usable open space. So the project in the end does not meet the open space requirement and is requesting a concession, as I'll mention a little bit more about soon. So looking at materials and the elevations, this is largely unchanged from the previous iteration. It's primarily 3 color stucco hues, metal siding in these recessed areas, a decorative metal balcony for the balconies on the new and existing units, and a wood fence, and aluminum windows. Here you can see the project in context on the street. And this time around, we also have a landscape plan. And you can see the tree types here. We have a number of trees on the rear yard, along the side yard, where to provide some privacy and landscaping. Most of the common open space area is hardscaped with these landscape edges in the side yard and in the front yard. So I mentioned this is a state density bonus law application, and so that's how they're exceeding the typical density, which is 63 units an acre. They're achieving that density bonus by providing one very low income unit. And in that way, the project is eligible for 2 concessions. Additionally, the project has to meet the city's inclusionary housing requirement, which in this case is more than what's required under state density bonus law. And so with the 15% requirements and rounding up, they're required to provide one very low and one low income unit in the new building. They've reduced the number of waivers and concessions requested overall. They're still requesting, the applicant's still requesting a height waiver to increase the height from 35 feet to just over 45 feet, from 3 stories to 4 stories, increasing the FAR, and 2 concession requests. One, to reduce the parking requirement from 14 spaces to 0 spaces, and reducing the open space requirement from 2,800 square feet to 2,400 square feet. The project does meet all objective zoning standards as modified by state density bonus law, those waivers and concessions I mentioned, and the non-conforming requirements of Albany zoning ordinance. The site is designated as a housing element opportunity site, and the project's compliant with that realistic capacity of the housing element, which protects projects that are at least 2/3 residential and which meet objective standards. So the city may only reject the project if there's a preponderance of evidence that the project would have a significant unavoidable impact. I wanted to mention a few notable conditions of approval. First, related to construction. There are a number of large trees off-site very close to the property line, so the project will be required to prepare a tree protection plan at the time of building permit submittal to make sure those trees are protected during construction, and then continue to have those measures in place throughout the construction period. The project will also be required to prepare a construction management plan, and that's identifying where contractor vehicles will park, where materials and equipment would be staged, how traffic management would happen on the sidewalk. In particular, because there is a lot of grading proposed on the site, 197 cubic yards of off-haul. And so managing queuing, not allowing queuing on Evelyn during those times of large deliveries, during the off-haul, to make sure that we don't have backups on that narrow street. Providing a construction sign with contractor information, having a pre-construction meeting to work out a lot of these issues on the site with the contractor prior to construction. During operation and design of the project, conditions of approval requiring utility screening for any above ground utilities, for any rooftop equipment, verifying colors and materials. Since the commission does not have the opportunity to review the actual colors, we've suggested that the applicant prepare brush outs and that staff, in addition to the designated commissioner, review the brush outs of materials and colors. Compliance with public art, preparation of an affordable housing agreement. This would be approved at the council, and that would be the regulations for the 2 BMR units on the site. And then lastly, a plan for the bicycle parking and refuse room. So the existing tenants of that front building would have access to the bicycle parking room and the discards, the refuse room in the new building. So ensuring that they have, whether it's a key fob or a key code entry, making sure that they have 24/7 access to those facilities. And then lastly, an operations and maintenance plan to make sure that the common open space is maintained, that move in and move outs are coordinated, since this is a narrow site and a narrow street, making sure that access is considered. We received a couple, in your packet are public comments from the previous round of review, so that's from the July meeting. Additionally, in the last couple of days, we received a comment letter about compliance with the Housing Accountability Act, confirming that, and another letter regarding the non-conforming issues, which I mentioned on the site, and regarding the fact that the below market rate units would need to be in the new building. So staff's recommendation is for the commission to review the proposed project and to adopt a resolution forwarding a recommendation to the city council to approve the project. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also do have Isaiah Stackhouse from Trachtenberg Architects on the line if you would like to hear his presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for contract vendor Iceberg?
I have a question. The plans show the proposed density bonus project, which is what you presented, but there's also the base project. Is that kind of, I'm not quite sure why that's shown. That's just to show that it could be done according to the standards.
That's right. So in order to understand why the concessions are required, why the waivers are needed, we asked to see the base project to understand how the project could actually meet those zoning standards, and why a project that, in order to get those affordable units, those density bonus units, why the project could not meet the standards that they're proposing to waive and the standards that they're proposing concessions for.
I have a couple of questions. Sorry, Commissioner Kent, were you done?
Yeah, no, I'm done. Just one.
Okay, great. So first off, I was just wondering if, so I believe it's a combination of 1 and 2 bedroom units, right? In the new build.
Yeah.
Has there been a proposal by the applicant, or is there a requirement under our inclusionary housing ordinance about which type of units the below market units need to be? Like, do they need to be 2 bedroom units, or can they be 1 bedroom units, or do we have discretion to kind of impose requirements relating to that?
They haven't been proposed yet by the applicant, and I believe they need to be generally comparable to the market rate units. So that may include a mix of 1s and 2s.
Okay, but since there's just 1 very low income unit and 1 low income unit, do you, and I know I might be putting you on the spot here, but I'm just curious. I guess what I'm getting at is I would like to see them be 2 bedroom units if possible.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's, and maybe the applicant or architect can speak to that when they have a chance.
Just want to add one point to that. When this goes to council, there is an affordable housing agreement, at which time the applicant is required to show on the site plan which units they intend to designate for affordability. So there is still some additional review that gets vetted out as part of the final approval.
Okay, and that agreement actually goes to council? Or,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, usually when I work on these, that trails, so wasn't sure. Also, Jeannie, you mentioned the public art requirements that would apply. Could you just remind us what what that actually looks like here? I know they probably don't have an actual proposal yet, but what's the sort of requirement?
So they have 2 options. They can either provide the public art on site, or they can pay a fee in lieu. At this point, they have not proposed public art on site, and maybe they can tell you if they have plans to. If they did propose public art, they would have to come back to the commission for design review.
Okay. And is that like a percentage of the overall construction budget?
Sorry, yes, exactly. I think it's 1.5%.
It's actually
Anne's going to interrupt.
Yeah, just to let you know, it is 1.75% of the overall job valuation, but that valuation is not based on the actual construction estimates. It's based on a fee calculator that we run in the building department based on our master fee schedule.
Thank you. And then one more, which is, so I'm trying to think through and make sure I understand how the request for the concession relating to elimination of parking works here. I understand it, and I think I understand the basis for granting that concession as it relates to the 14 new units. I'm having a little bit more trouble understanding the basis for that concession as it relates to the existing 4 units and removing the parking that exists right now. And I think we actually got a comment about this today that's kind of on this topic as well. I'm just curious if you can speak to the question about like, are they really providing the below market rate units at the percentages required in order to, you know, essentially earn a concession that relieves, you know, any parking requirement for the existing units as well as the new ones. And if it's staff's view that they are, that's, you know, that's fine. And I'm just curious if that's been evaluated.
So 2 points. One, that for the concession request, the applicant needs to demonstrate that it's essentially a cost feasibility issue. And so their proposal, they did show us a number of alternatives, and you may recall some of them from the July meeting when they did propose surface parking. Their base project in the plan set is showing essentially a basement elevator, and that's the way they could actually make all the parking work. Our understanding in working with the city attorney is that issues of the non-conforming ordinance, typically we cannot make non-conforming issues worse. So right now, the way it is now, we have these 6 parking spaces. They're non-conforming with respect to backup distance. And so typically we would not want to reduce parking, therefore making it worse. But because this is a density bonus project, all of that essentially gets waived. The project is still considered compliant with objective standards, even though those existing parking spaces are removed. So whether we're looking at the concession request for just the new building or the project site as a whole, we're really looking at them in the same way and looking for the concession request across the entire site.
Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Donaldson.
Jean, I think I have a question for you. Will you explain a little bit more about how you came up at one low income unit and one very low income unit? And then I want to confirm now, both of those, would those both be so-called affordable units that would count as affordable units under the RENA requirements from the state? Mm-hmm.
Yes, so the applicant has proposed the one very low income unit in order to get their 32.5% density bonus request. However, the city's inclusionary ordinance, based on a base project of the 10 units, or excuse me, based on the base project of 14 units, it works out to 1.5 unit requirement for the project. The city's ordinance requires that we round up. So the inclusionary ordinance says, okay, you need to provide 2 units, and one of those should be low income and one of those should be very low income. So the state density bonus proposal by the applicant is already taking care of that one very low income unit, but in order to meet the city's inclusionary requirement, the project also needs to provide one low income unit. And those are consistent with the categories under RENA. So this would move the city one additional low income unit and one additional very low income unit towards meeting the RENA in the current, I think in the current cycle. It depends when the permit actually was issued, but I think it's in the current cycle.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm.
And Jeannie, I had one question for you, just for sort of point of clarification to get this on the record. I know there have been a lot of changes to state density bonus law over the last few years, so it seems like it's a constantly moving target a bit. But just wanted to clarify that, is it true that the burden of proof, if you will, as it relates to concessions and incentives has shifted and is no longer a burden that the applicant has to prove that it's a cost savings, but rather the burden is now on the city, that if the city believes that it is not a cost saving concession or incentive, the city must prove that versus the applicant must demonstrate it is. Can you just talk a little bit about that or validate if my understanding is accurate or not?
Yes, that's right. So in the past, I think up until about 2 years ago, we could ask for additional research, reports, information to demonstrate that concession request was actually reducing the cost. And now we can kind of ask for a little bit, but as you said, the burden of proof is on the city to demonstrate that it's not.
Great, thank you. I think that's important for the public to understand in terms of these concessions and incentives, that the applicant is not required to sort of pepper the record with their justification and background knowledge. So thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions before we turn it over to the project applicant for a presentation? Okay, great. Then Chris, why don't we go ahead and open up the project applicant to speak for a presentation.
Okay, Isaiah Stackhouse, you have 5 minutes starting now.
I apologize. I need to run his presentation and my computer just froze. So hold on. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Well, good evening. Nice to be here with you tonight. I'm Isaiah Stackhouse from Trachtenberg Architects, and on our team we have David Trachtenberg and Eric Tam, and Sue Oda, our landscape.
Isaiah, can you speak up a little bit, please?
Okay. Sue Oda, our landscape architect, and owners Dorothea and Kevin Kaz. Next slide, please. So it's a great location near BART, groceries and services. Next slide. As we talked about, it's listed as a housing opportunity site, but it's remained vacant and underutilized because it's a long and narrow, challenging site to develop. Next slide. It's so narrow, in fact, that you can't get compliant perpendicular parking to fit on the site. It's not possible to fully park above grade, and an underground system would just be wildly expensive and not actually feasible, although that would be the only way to fully park a project. Next slide. So the previous scheme did provide a minimal number of parking spots, but those few spaces came at the detriment of a lot of other very important aspects of the project. Next slide. So the previous scheme from the study session, most of the open area of the site was paved over. All but one unit had to walk down a narrow driveway also used by cars to get to their unit. All but 2 units had no access to any on-site open space. And then due to the fixed dimensions needed to shoehorn in parking, the old project required a rear yard waiver. The stairs in the building were very squeezed, and there was only minimal bike parking in the project. Next slide. But with this new site plan, with the parking lot replaced with a shared garden, addresses most, if not all, of these issues, and we believe makes the project much better. So the pedestrian driveway conflict is now replaced with a welcoming garden entry. While the old site had been paved over, we now have this central landscape garden. Where 16 of the 18 units had no access to open space, now all of the units in both the front building and the new building have access to the lush, well-landscaped central courtyard. The rear yard waiver is no longer necessary, and the bike parking has been expanded from 14 spaces up to 35, including room for full-size cargo bikes. The stairways are now wider, and to further increase open space, balconies have been added at the front and back where the code allows, and Juliet balconies where the code does not allow. Next slide. On the typical residential plan, again, generous balconies towards the front and back. Juliet's at the units that face the side yard to give those an open air feeling, and you can see the widened stairs. Next slide. Here's an axon aerial view showing the entry garden, and you can see the courtyard in the middle. Next slide. The view from the street. Next. Here's a detail of the new entry court and the entry garden. Next slide. A view from inside the garden. Next slide. A plan detail showing the entry court gate. We have provided a private patio at the front unit, which faces a courtyard, enabling us to get a fence in there to give privacy for that unit. And then there's the seating area in the middle, new lobby, and you can see the new larger bike room there as well. Next slide. Elevations showing Juliet balconies. Next slide. Front and rear elevations with balconies. Next slide. Proposing a high quality palette of materials with integral colored stucco and hand troweled decorative metal railing balconies. Next slide. Well detailed building with recessed windows, heads and sills for building longevity. Next slide. And that concludes our presentation, but we're here for your questions.
Great, thank you. Why don't we first, are there any questions for the project applicant from commissioners before we open it up for public comment?
I would
Commissioner
just like
Jennings?
oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Commissioner.
To repeat the question that I posed initially to staff about the BMR units, and if the applicant has a proposal for whether the very low and low income units would be 1 or 2 bedroom units, or if there would be one of each.
Yeah, typically the law requires that they be of equal size, proportional to the project, equal size and equally spread throughout the building. So we haven't looked to identify, but we would expect that the percentage would match the overall percentage in terms of the mix. And so it would probably be 1 2-bedroom and 1 1-bedroom. And so we'll certainly, when it goes to council, identify which ones, again, they would be equally kind of spread throughout the building as well, and not in any one location.
Great, thank you. And then Commissioner McLeod, did you have your hand raised also?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit on suggestion I made at the last hearing, which was to go all electric with the building. And I was wondering, at least with the new building, I'm not sure what the status of the older building would be, but are you planning on doing an all electric building? And then also, what is the plan? Are you for solar panels on the roof? Is there any plan for that? How are you thinking about that?
Neither of those has been fully determined yet. Certainly everything's moving towards electric, but we haven't yet gotten the MEP engineers going to really determine specifically which building systems would get used, what types of equipment. And with solar, certainly, the California code now requires pre-wiring. It'll do that at the very least. But we haven't talked, the team hasn't talked beyond that, what we'll do.
Okay.
All right, are there any other questions? All right, Seeing no other questions, Chris, why don't we go ahead and open public comment on this item?
Sure. The first speaker we have up is Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Thank you. The total units of this building is 14, 18, something, yeah, 18. I know my grandfather manages 401 Cornell, and everybody parks underneath in the basement. I looked at Google View, Street View, and every single apartment complex down this block and across the street, there's underground parking. I'm just curious. There's 2 units. You got a husband and a wife, maybe a kid over 16. So you got 3 cars times 18, give or take, the 1 unit. You got about 50 cars, you know, if not everybody rides a bicycle like you're intending. 50 cars is a lot of cars. Where's everybody going to park their cars? You know, I mean, there just doesn't seem like a lot of space. Are you expecting everybody to park in El Cerrito Plaza? It just, I mean, where's the incentive on people buying electric cars? You know, we're moving toward electric cars and requirements. And I don't see this new construction offering not even one EV plug-in, not even one parking space. That poses a problem. Have you talked to the neighbors about this? I mean, where's everybody going to park their cars? You're taking away the parking that already exists. So what about the people that live there already in the front? They're used to parking their car there. So now you're taking their parking space away. You know, they lease the apartment knowing there's a parking space, and now there's not going to be a parking space. I just don't get it. You know, now you're going to have it's right next to the school. You know, there's no parking, and it seems kind of suspicious to me that the city would have passed this when there's no room for anybody to park their cars. And it kind of seems like, you know, the affordable housing below market rate. Well, thanks a lot, but it kind of seems like you're just doing the bare minimum because you have to. Kind of seems like you're trying to make the most money as you can out of this, you know. We all know that song, The Price to Put Up a Parking Lot, right? No, it's too expensive. You're not making any money on it. But, you know, if you could do more for affordable housing, maybe offer a 3rd unit, you know, go above and beyond. You know, you might get yourself an award, you know, but it just seems like you're doing the bare minimum because you legally have to. You just want to make the most money you can out of this project. And it kind of seems it's more about the money and not about doing the right thing for the environment regarding electric vehicles. Doesn't seem like you're going above and beyond to do the right thing for affordable housing when you have this opportunity.
Time up. Let's see, sorry. And the next speaker we have up is Stuart Gooderman. Stuart, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Thank you for taking my comment. I live at 417 Evelyn Avenue in Suite 105. My unit and the units above me face that empty space right there at this site. So besides the fact that this building is going to completely block any free access to any open space, because both my rooms have windows that face that way, this project now is even worse than it was when they proposed it in July. No parking. They've narrowed the entryway, and there was a question about fire access. If there was a fire there, how the fire department would get in. So you've narrowed the space even further for access. And we talked about the fact that there are no elevators in a multi-story building. Now, if somebody is on the 3rd floor of this building and becomes handicapped, you know, maybe they have a stroke, maybe they break a leg or something, how are they going to get out of their apartment? They essentially are trapped in their apartment. So this is totally unfeasible, totally unfeasible. I can't believe that they are even thinking of it. I'm scared that if they put up the project and there's a fire here, that we're going to burn down to the ground. So thank you for my comments. And the parking situation is bad enough as it is on Evelyn. This is going to make it 10 times worse. Even the new housing project over in El Cerrito Plaza, they have parking in those units over there, which is right a half a block north of where we are right now. It's unfeasible not to have any parking, completely unfeasible. People need a car. They have to get to the emergency room or something. They can't get on it on a bike, you know? So let's rethink this again, or forget about it completely, because I think it's a project that should never be built in the first place. Thank you.
Okay. I see no other hands raised in the attendees. Oh wait, I lied. Christina Radcliffe has her hand up. Christina, you have 3 minutes to speak, starting now.
Thank you so much. You didn't lie. I raised my hand late. Thank you, Chris. I just wanted to speak in favor of this project. Thank you, staff. Thank you, contract planner, for the very informative staff report. I think it's a great project, and Albany needs it, needs more housing, needs more affordable housing. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now there are no more speakers.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So seeing no more speakers, we will go ahead and close public comment and turn it back to the commission for deliberation. Would anyone like to kick things off here? Okay, Commissioner McLeod.
Well, just a follow-up question to staff and perhaps the applicant. I mean, what about fire access? Is that an issue? I was imagining not, but I don't think fire engines have to drive all the way to the back building, do they? I mean, that's not a requirement, just to be clear.
Right. So the fire department did review the site plan. They indicated that the north and south 5-foot setbacks were compliant. They do want a continuous path, so they would likely need access through those private patios. It is also possible to pull the hose up Ohlone Greenway. They still need to review the final window locations to make sure that the openings work between the proposed building and the neighboring buildings. And they were concerned about the refuse containers on the street. And that's one of the reasons why we have that operations plan as a condition of approval, to make sure that the trash bins get picked up in a timely manner, that they're organized on the street. And this is an issue for other apartments on the block that they keep track of.
Okay, so just to be clear, we don't need a driveway for a fire engine to go into the courtyard. So.
Right, thank you. So yeah, you know, the way it is now, that fire engine cannot get through the way that the front unit's balcony hangs. So they don't need to get the vehicle back there. They just need to get the hose from the front, or as I said, pull it up the Ohlone Greenway in a pinch.
Okay, thank you.
On a certain level, I also had a similar question, just to clarify, on the issue of ADA accessibility within the new construction building in terms of elevator access. I know that's not normally something that's under the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's usually a building code requirement that comes, that's analyzed after our review, but just wondering if you know off the top of your head, is that a requirement for a building of this size and scale? If it is, you know, do you have any information along those lines in terms of that requirement?
I don't have an answer to the elevator requirement. The one thing we did check on in terms of ADA with the city's third-party building plan check is about ADA parking, and if we needed ADA parking, if no other parking is provided, and the answer there was no. So no ADA parking is required if there's no parking provided. We would need to get back to you about the elevator. I don't have an answer there.
I'm wondering if we could ask maybe the project architect, because I know the project architect has built, you know, other projects of this scale, if they might have information on building code, just so I think that is an important question for us to be able to inform the public of as part of this.
Yeah, happy to address that. Below 5 stories, elevators are not required in buildings. So, so 4-story walk-ups are allowable by code. And so the ground level of the project is designed to be fully accessible. So there are 2 units on the ground level which are fully accessible, and you know, and level in landings at the lobby. There's an interior ramp on the ground floor that ramps up to those units.
Great, thank you. That's helpful clarification. Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I guess that was my follow-up question, was whether those were ADA compliant on the ground floor. And I'm trying to look, but you know, barrier-free showers, I mean, those kind of things would be important. So, you know, it's just one thing to look at.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Right, okay. Let's see, there's a lot of things to like here, and still I do have what I think are some serious concerns to talk about as well. Let's see, where can I start? I like the design quality generally of the project. I think the plans are really impressive, very, very detailed. And in fact, the kind of thing we've grown to expect, I think, from this architect, Trachtenberg firm. It's so well documented and put together, easy to read, easy to understand. I think that's, I think that goes without saying. I wish I liked the project better, but anyway. We had comments the last time about open space, and even though they now have, or still need to get a concession for open space, I think that they really put a lot of effort into that, and it's workable and very nice. And even though it is what, 400 square feet short of our standards, I still think it's very good and a very good addition to the project. I like the walk-ups. I like the walk-up idea because this is a transit-oriented development, no cars encouraged, and so you're going to want to have tenants, people living in here who are fit and active, and so they shouldn't need elevators. They're going to have to get around by walking, and I think having a walk-up is going to help self-select that kind of population to occupy the building. So I'm very much in favor of having the walk-up requirement, of having the big bike rooms where the bicycles can be protected, that would encourage a demographic that would in fact be transit oriented and not car oriented as much, car dependent anyway. I like the addition of the balconies. I think that actually improves all the units. And there were some little things in there. The trash collection systems are really well thought out, and I like that it integrated the older building on the site into the new trash collection system. And I say also the drainage systems kind of integrated into the building, improve the look, and are real good. So there's some of the things I really liked. The big issue for me, the first big issue for me, I have two, is the lack of parking. And that going to zero spaces is really almost unacceptable to me, and it really does bother me. This area is already fully parked. I go by there all the time. I walked down there last night. There's zero parking on the street on that block available at 7 or 8 o'clock last night, and that's typical. The spaces that are there for now on the existing units, which are sometimes occupied, tenants in that existing 4 units have cars. Those will be lost because of this. And in the neighborhood context, we have to consider other things that are going on. The middle school is not in session, they're on virtual, but the middle school has developed its parking lot for teachers, for the faculty and staff with portables. So all of that parking demand from the middle school gets put onto the streets. And this street, and probably including this street, although this street is almost always parked up anyway. And now we read in the Chronicle about the BART proposal, which would remove 490 parking spaces that BART now has at El Cerrito Plaza Station to construct 780 new dwelling units. So BART would be left with 250 parking spaces for all of the existing demand, and probably some people in those 780 new units they're talking about would drive their cars. I asked staff, I asked Ann about, can we condition this project to be really transit-oriented development by saying, if you live here, if you rent in this building, one of the restrictions is you can't own a car. Just like if you rent in a senior citizen housing project, you have to be over 55. Ann's response to that is no, we can't do that because it would violate the Fair Housing Act. And that she's probably right. She knows better than I do on that. So what we have here is a transit-oriented development with no parking whatsoever, but that can be filled with people who do have cars. I don't know how many of the tenants in this building are not going to drive. Probably some. I'm sure that's the case. But they will be adding to the parking demand that the city of Albany is going to have to absorb. And we have to suffer that cost if we take on this project and this, in fact, development of this kind. And we're going to get clobbered maybe by if the BART development goes on, and as other transit-oriented developments get built in the area. So it's a real problem for me, and probably a real planning dilemma. I think that the myth of that transit-oriented development is operating on a myth that everybody there is going to not need cars. And that just isn't going to be the case. Some will not, but most will probably be having cars. All right. So then when I first saw the new plans, I thought it looked larger. It seemed to have grown quite a bit from the July set of plans that we saw from the project we first saw. And, at first it didn't bother me, but the more I looked into it, I really do think it has. And I think the problem is the base project. That the base project is what would be allowed under our zoning ordinance and under our general plan and under our zoning ordinance for this site. And I think that staff has allowed the applicant to have too big a base project here. And so when you add on the density bonus, we end up with a very large project relative to the size of this site, a constrained site, a site that's too narrow actually for the zoning that we have there. So I went back and looked again at sort of where the general plan is and what the zoning regulations are. And I'm pretty convinced that I think, in my opinion, is we should start over with a more reasonable base project, and one that really does conform with the general plan. And in the housing element, and Jean showed the page earlier in her presentation, says that the zoning might permit 11 units on the site, and that a realistic capacity is 9 units. Now, That includes the 4 units that are already there. So our general plan, the housing element of our general plan anticipates 5 more units on this site, in the back of this site. The base plan that the developer has shown us starts with 10 more units, a total of 14 total. I think that we need to like start over and take another look at the whole design, because the base project is too big, and therefore when you add in the density bonus, you get a project that, in my opinion, is really out of scale for the site and essentially for the neighborhood, as a matter of fact. So that's the general plan part of the base project. And then when you look at the zoning ordinance, table 2A in section 2024-020 says that the minimum lot area per dwelling unit, and that's in footnote 9, you got to dig in there for it, allows this site to have a total of between 11 and 12 units. That's in our zoning ordinance. And the square footage, I say between, because the square footages of the site don't fall right at the breakpoints in the table. So the base project that Trachtenberg and Associates and Architects have put forward has 14 units, and it's just too large. It doesn't conform with the zoning ordinance. And I think we need to have a conforming base project. And I think that we have an example of other sites on this very block that do have underground parking or semi-subterranean parking, which is less costly to develop. I think that we should still try to get some parking in this project, even though it is transit oriented. I really think that's really important to do. And that would be, I would like to see a new base project. I agree with Trachtenberg, if you put the parking underground in a big pit, that it would be financially infeasible. I'm quite sure that they're accurate in that. If you dig that big pit and put in mechanical lifts, the way they were looking at, there may be other ways to do it. I think some excavation, 4 feet down maybe, would be more feasible, and you could get some of the parking spaces, the parking demand for the project accommodated on the site. I don't know what the other commissioners are going to do. Maybe you're going to approve the project tonight. I don't know, but I do think it is too large, and I think the place to start looking at a project that would work on the site is first with the base project, and make sure the base project is equal to or less than what our zoning ordinance and our general plan would allow. Let's see, a couple of other little thoughts. I have been thinking about the dark colors. I think I'd like to see a lighter color palette. That I know dark is really in vogue these days. But I know I was looking at the middle school, the main wall colors on that are much, much lighter, with a darker trim. I don't know, I think if it is going to be a real large building here, maybe lighter colors would make it look a little less heavy. And then I should have asked Isaiah earlier, but because you're right beside the BART tracks, I'm assuming that there will be noise studies or sound rated windows in the building. That's going to be really important to make the units more livable and accommodating to the tenants. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Kent.
Yeah, a lot of a lot has been said, but I'll repeat the points that I think are most important. The open space is, as Doug said, it's very, very well used, even though it's under what is needed. The space that's there is really captured and used quite well. So I think that'd be all right to give that as a bonus. I don't see any wasted space on the plan. It's not in front of me right now, but looking at it, it was all used quite well. I think it's a place for a special type of person, and it could be a strong community. I easily think we could find people that want to live in Albany that don't need cars, and this would be a nice place. With the advent of e-bikes, you don't have to be super fit. You can be pretty fit, like me probably. Pretty fit, I guess. But I could do that. We have one car for a family. The thing that bothers me with the 2-bedroom setup, this is kind of a family-oriented building, which is quite difficult to. I don't know of any families that don't have cars. I know a lot of individuals or couples, but not families. Now there is potential that you work out something with Cerrito Plaza if they have extra parking that they could rent. I know the parking at the El Cerrito Plaza is uncoupled, so they rent out spaces. You don't have to live there to rent a space, I don't think. So there's options if you really needed a car. Drop off and delivery, getting furniture up and down, that's a hassle, but that's a hassle in all apartment buildings. I think the gentleman who was concerned about the fire access who lived in 417, I see the same issue occurring with 417. I don't see any better access to that building than there is to this one. So I'm assuming the fire review has that under control. So I'm not delving into that. Yeah, it does look like a lot of building in a small site and not the ideal location. But then it actually can be quite charming. It could be a really cool place to live. If you didn't have a bike, if you didn't have a car and you wanted to be with like-minded people, it's in a really great location for all that. It's next to the store, the retail at the plaza. It's close to BART. It's close to other open space like the Greenway and even basketball courts on the high school, or the middle school. So I think it's doable, and I would probably vote for it.
Commissioner Jennings.
So I think that just looking at the design itself compared to what we saw a few months ago, I like the open space layout a lot. I think that the site functions much better with the removal of the existing parking. It's a beautiful design in terms of how the building and the open space interact. And even though it's a little bit short of the requirements, I do think I appreciate that the applicant has gone a long way towards providing that on-site open space. So, taking the parking out of the equation and just setting that to the side for a moment, I think this is a much better design. In terms of the parking, if this was, just as a sheer policy matter, I'm very much in favor of reduced parking standards and, trying to encourage people not to make it super easy to have a lot of parking. I don't know that Albany is really there yet to go to a zero parking, especially, removing existing parking for a project of this size. But, I think that the state has kind of taken that decision and some of these other decisions out of our hands. The fact of the matter is that, we as a region and as a state, if not us as, our individual town or this individual commission, have not done enough to build housing and have not done enough to make it feasible to build affordable below market rate housing. And because we've said no so many times, again, I'm saying we collectively have said no to so much housing for so many years, the state has made it harder and harder for us to say no. We're now in a position where even if there are policy reasons where we might quibble with some of the choices that the applicant or architect have made here, I think they have met they've provided the facial showing that they meet the requirements to receive the waivers and the additional concessions under the density bonus law. And again, I think that the legislature has made the decision that is that if they make that showing, then they get the units. And so for me, I think this is an easy project to support. And I do support it. I think this is a good location for density. And I do think that, you know, as Commissioner Kent said, there are certain kinds of people who I think could really enjoy and appreciate living in a development like this. And even if that weren't the case, you know, again, I think that the decision somewhat is out of our hands. That said, you know, I do think that I appreciate Commissioner Donaldson digging into the zoning code and trying to, you know, calculate the density. I'll admit I did not do that. And, you know, I do think it's important that we get it right as well. And I am curious if staff could take a minute to address this question about the base project, because when I read the staff report and looked at the applicant's plans, it all made sense to me and appeared correct that you know, the base project they were describing is actually what would be allowed on the site. But you know, Commissioner Donaldson raised some concerns about that, and I'm curious if you could address it.
Sure. So the zoning for this site allows 63 units an acre, and under state density bonus law, the base project needs to allow that 63 units an acre. And so that calculates out based on the lot size to 14 units. So that's 4 units on the existing building and 10 units in the rear building. And you may recall that when the applicant presented this project in July, they had considered a number of ways to actually park the project. And because we suggested a similar idea to Commissioner Donaldson, well, why can't we put the parking below grade, like what's next door? And the issue from the applicant, from what they told us, is that because the lot is so narrow, they actually can't make the underground garage work between the columns and the limited backup distance. The circulation doesn't work in that below grade structure or even in that podium structure. And so that's how they ended up with this elevator system. But we need to allow 10 units in that rear yard building. They also explored a townhome configuration. So they looked at some different site massing, and I'm not sure how many other solutions we could come up with. But what we can't do is we can't say that the base project needs to be 6 units or 8 units. It's possible they could be even smaller units than are proposed now, but you know, these units are 500, 800 square feet. So I'm not sure how much smaller you could really get and meet the building code requirements.
Okay, thank you. But you are confident that 14 units is an accurate assessment of the base project?
Yes, so we figured out the rounding. We worked with the Albany City Attorney's Office to make that determination, yes.
Thanks. Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I'd like to say, first of all, I really like this project. You know, I really like the intention for transit-oriented development. I really support trading off parking spaces for open space and other amenities on the site. I'm really pleased with the bike room. I think that's really excellent. Plenty of room in there. I mean, my only quibble would be maybe the mix could be a little more space for cargo bikes, because one way to live in the city without a car is with a cargo bike. I have one, and I'm able to go grocery shopping and do a whole bunch of other things with, you know, I do have a car, but I am able to not use it for about half my trips around town or more when it's local. And there are other alternatives. There's ride sharing, car sharing, plenty of other options. Sometimes in cases like this, developers will provide free transit passes for user or for residents. You know, and I agree with the idea that electric bikes make it a lot more possible to get around and, you know, do whatever you need to do without a car and without a whole lot of effort. I mean, really, this is the absolute ideal place to do this kind of development, with the BART station 5-minute walk away, 2 grocery stores a 5-minute walk away or so, and other shops right there nearby. Bus service to San Francisco is right nearby. There's all sorts of great transit options. It's a transit-rich area, and it's possible to walk, you know, to Solano Avenue pretty easily. It's, you know, in my mind, this is the ideal place to do this. And, you know, so in that sense, I support it completely. You know, it also helps us reach our climate action goals, which is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, reduce greenhouse gas production. I hope you would go all electric in that sense. It would be really beneficial. May save you a lot of pain in 10 or 15 years if the state actually does ban gas throughout the whole state, and that would be an expensive conversion to have to go through by 2035 or 2040. We may not have a gas network anymore. So other ideas, you know, it may be time to consider neighborhood parking zones, 2-hour zones, resident only zones. That's another way of dealing with parking that gets, you know, too busy on the streets, especially during the day. Other concerns I have, sort of architecturally, I do agree with Commissioner Donaldson. Maybe the color palette could be lightened up a bit. And then I have a concern still about the hallways going to the units, upper floor units, especially. Just seems like very long, narrow hallways without a whole lot of natural light. I think those windows should be bigger. I could see how that could be kind of a dark experience and not very pleasant. I'm really pleased you put not elevators, but bigger windows or put windows in the stairwells. I think that would have been a really miserable experience without windows. In fact, I think those could be bigger. I think a lot of the windows on the south side of the building could be bigger. Let's see, what else? You know, maybe making more generous doors for getting in and out with bikes, more generous gate at the front. I'd also encourage solar panels on the roof. But overall, I really, really support this project. I think we, like others have said, we don't really have a choice. We can't deny the concessions or the waivers. That's out of our purview. You know, I cannot find that it would have, you know, significant or huge impacts. So in that sense, we were basically obligated to support the project. And even so, I do 100%. So I'd like to see it move forward and go to council. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Commissioner McLeod. And I'll just chime in, and not to reiterate what others have said, but I completely agree with especially the comments that Commissioner Jennings made. And I do think it is important for us to really acknowledge the intent of state density bonus law. You know, the intent of state density bonus law isn't to just get a couple extra units and if it works. I think really the point of state density bonus law is to really give developers a financial incentive to build more density and to build on-site affordable housing. And also part of the point here is to make a value judgment that those things, density and on-site affordable housing, are more important to our community writ large than massing and parking. And I think to me that is really what it's coming down to, is sort of a value judgment here of is convenient parking, is the height of a building, are those things more important for our community than building more housing and more on-site affordable housing? Because I don't think we can, you know, make the argument here that you can get the same amount of housing in a smaller envelope and get parking. It does come down to these policy choices. And to me, the inconvenience of parking isn't worth that trade-off to me. I do think that also when we're talking about a new construction building, people are going in eyes wide open. They know what this building is. They know this building doesn't have parking. And I think to people who really value parking, I think a good example is the sort of the project we had earlier this evening. There are different demographics in our community, and there are some folks who really value convenient, easy accessibility to parking more so than others. And I think this is an option for people. I would say the only comment I do have on the parking front is that for, to the developer, what I would at least encourage is that for those tenants that are in the current building that do have existing parking access, that they are worked with in terms of their lease rate, so that perhaps their leases are reduced if their parking is removed, since sort of a housing service is being removed. But again, overall, to me, the balance here and the trade-off that we have to weigh is sort of the value of building more housing and affordable housing on site, and recognizing it is at the cost of parking. It is at the cost of more congested streets. But to me, again, I would agree that this is the ideal location for us to build a building like this. I don't think it's dramatically at odds with the architecture that is especially to the north of the building. I do agree that the revised details of the project, including the open space and the sort of landscaping plan and the entry, are much better. I actually, regardless of the parking quantity issue, had a real concern about the parking conflicts and the pedestrian safety that would come from both residents and from folks walking on that street to get to El Cerrito Plaza, coming through that really, really narrow drive aisle. And so I think this is a much better approach, and sort of a more overall sort of sustainable for the health of residents. And again, really the standard here is, can we make the findings, or do we feel like this project has an adverse impact on health and safety? That is the bar that we have to meet in order to disapprove this project. Both in terms of state density bonus law, but also Housing Accountability Act, SB 330 that recently passed. You're only allowed to have 5 hearings on a project that is compliant with the Housing Accountability Act. Really, the bar has been set quite high because we have not done this. And I know these hearings sometimes feel a little awkward when we have more discretion and say over single family home remodels than we do of large new construction projects. It seems counterintuitive, but I do think there is a greater sort of policy to this, and hopefully in time, as more housing gets produced in the city and in the region and in the state, perhaps more discretion does come back locally. But I do think this is the result of decades of a lot of people saying no, one little project at a time. So for all of those reasons, I'm supportive of moving this forward. I think there have been a lot of sensitive sort of design considerations and revisions made in response to our comments. And I certainly don't feel like we can make the findings necessary to disapprove this project. And so for those reasons, I'd be voting to support the project tonight. Are there any other comments, or would one of the commissioners like to propose a motion?
Yes, I can propose a motion to approve planning application 20-019.
A second.
With that second, then I'll call the vote here. Commissioner McLeod.
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson.
No.
Commissioner Kent.
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings.
Yes.
And I too vote yes on this motion. So that motion passes 4-1 to approve this project. Sorry, my agenda just fell down on me, but here, item 6-3, density bonus and design review at 423 Evelyn. And with this, that is a resolution, and staff correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a resolution. And so this is moving forward to the city council. So there's not a separate appeal process. This is just being forwarded to the city council.
You've just moved to adopt that resolution, which forwards the recommendation to city council, and they will be the ultimate deciding body.
Okay, great. So that item has been moved. With that, we will then turn to the next item on our agenda for this evening, which is item 7, new business. We have 2 items under new business. First up is item 7-1. This item was continued from October 28th, and it is proposed amendments to chapter 20-100, procedures of the municipal code.
And
That staff presentation.
Yeah, before we begin, given this late hour, we actually need the commission to extend the meeting. The agenda sets a limitation of 9:30 p.m. and given that it's almost 10:15, we'll have to ask you to take that procedural step before we can proceed.
And maybe I'll just ask staff for a little guidance on this. I don't think I have been around in doing this before. Do we need to take a vote on that, or do we all just need to nod saying we're fine, keeping going?
Someone needs to make a motion to extend the meeting. I will leave it up to the commission if you think you can get through these items. And
I move to extend the meeting to no
45
later
minutes?
than 11 o'clock. Mhm.
Okay, great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner McLeod, on that vote, Commissioner Jennings?
With reservations, I will do that. Let's try to make it 10:30, folks.
Yeah, we'll try to move this fast.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Jennings, that's a second. Oh, great. Commissioner Kent?
No, but it won't matter, I don't think.
Okay, let's see, Commissioner Donaldson.
I'll vote yes. Mhm.
Sorry, it's getting late. Commissioner McLeod, did I already call on you?
Yeah, I'll vote yes. Yes.
Okay, great. And I vote yes. That passes 4-1. We're extending
So
to
can
no
I
later
go?
than 11.
Can I go then? You guys stay. No.
Okay, so go ahead, staff. Why don't we get the presentation? We will try to be expeditious here.
Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. I'm going to try to go as fast as I can. Once again, before you tonight is the continued discussion on the code amendments for section 2100 procedures of the Albany Municipal Code. Some background in general, the reason why we update codes in the zoning code is projects reviewed for general compliance with the zoning code routinely reveal portions of the code that require further clarification and modification, ambiguity within the code, and changes in common planning practices often render some of our code out of date and prompt staff to initiate amendments with the commission. Additionally, with this very hard year we're going through, alternative accommodations have had to be made in result of the shelter in place, along with general ambiguity within the code and highlighted areas of improvement for application processing. And just a brief timeline of where our code changes have started and where they are now. On July 22nd of this year, the commission approved resolution of intention 2020-04, initiating the code amendments for section 2100. On October 28th of this year, the commission reviewed the proposed draft language and provided specific feedback to city staff. The discussion was continued to a date certain of December 9th, 2020. And so before you tonight, we have incorporated the feedback that was received by the commission and members of the public into the latest draft code language for review and possible action this evening. So based on the comments received at the last commission hearing by both the commissioners and members of the public, the following modifications have been made to the associated subsections within the code below. Within the code section for common permits procedures, the contents of public notices have been clearly split into 2 categories, one specifically for administrative design review and the other for planning and zoning commission review. We've also included the requirement that 3D renderings showing the proposed street front for new construction projects be added to the noticing process as well. Within design reviews, the design review subsection, we omitted the phrase public hearing where not relevant. We specified a cutoff time for action by the community development director, and we've omitted the term secondary residential units to be consistent with state code. And then lastly, within the common permit procedures, the authority language with respect to who can initiate code amendments has been retained as we move forward with the code amendments. And then I'll go through this again really quickly. This is what was presented at the last commission hearing, but basically we have made modifications to what receives a public hearing. All projects that are subject to planning and zoning commission review still have a public hearing, whereas projects that are approved by the community development director will still get public notification, but no formal hearing will take place. Additionally, within common permit procedures, we've omitted a provision that wasn't really in practice about applicants posting notices in a conspicuous location on the subject site. We add clarification for when and where story poles should be installed, and this is now been modified to only include building additions that increase 7 feet in height or greater, and thus result in a new level for the home. New construction projects will no longer be required to install story poles, but we'll have the aforementioned 3D renderings, story poles, let's see, current circles. And then let's see, within the design review subsection, for all matters that fall under the community development director, formal public hearings are proposed to be removed as a requirement, as mentioned before. Public notification for all projects will still remain. Community development director will still retain the authority to refer projects to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and action, which will remain in place. Then. There have been no modifications to Table 11, Authority of Design Review, except for the omission of the term secondary residential units, as mentioned earlier too. Currently, to reiterate that we proposed to remove the resolution of intention, but allowed the authority language to be in place that the City Council or the Planning and Zoning Commission could initiate code amendment changes. And this is to help expedite the code amendment process due to limited hearings that we have during the year, and to result in a more efficient use of both commission and staff time. Correspondence is received for this latest iteration of code amendments. We haven't received any public correspondences. For the previous code amendment language, and the last hearing, we received 2 correspondences voicing concerns with public noticing on the subject site, story pole height increases for 7 feet and over, the removal of the resolution of intention, minor formatting issues, and minor grammar modifications. And with that, staff requests that the Planning and Zoning Commission adopt Resolution 2020-05, forwarding a recommendation to the City Council to amend Chapter 2100 Procedures of the Albany Municipal Code. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, and staff is happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Does anyone have any questions for staff on this item? If not, why don't we go ahead and open it up for public comment? Is there any public comment on this item?
I do not see any hands up for this item.
Okay, seeing no public comment, then we'll go ahead and close public comment, turn it back to the commission. Do any commissioners have comments, or would anyone like to make a motion? Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, I do have one comment. I'll probably have to vote no again here. I really do think we should keep the resolution of intention. But since I may not win that motion, I want to make a comment. And on page 5 of the marked up copy that we received tonight with all of the notions in there, if this were to go forward, it would say initiation. Amendment may be initiated by Planning and Zoning Commission. That's not enough. It did say by resolution of intention of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We need to say something like by a motion of the Planning and Zoning Commission or something. The Planning and Zoning Commission would have to do something if we don't have a resolution of intention, and to start the process. And I'm in favor of having a resolution of intention and not changing this language, because I think that modifying the zoning ordinance, as I've said before, is a pretty big deal and should be a more formalized process. It should not be overly simplified, which I think this would do. So that's my comment.
Well, I'm in favor of removing the resolution of intention. As I've said before, I do think that the amendment of the zoning ordinance still has, is still accorded a due degree of seriousness. There's always going to be a public hearing. To the extent that the Planning and Zoning Commission has comments, which we often do, it comes back for at least a second hearing before getting forwarded to the City Council, and there will always be an additional hearing before the City Council. And I just personally, in the years that I've been on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I have not seen much, if any, value in that additional front end step of the resolution of intention. So, I respectfully disagree and think it's an okay thing to remove. But your point about we should clarify, like, if we're keeping that authority language in there, should we say what that actually means? And perhaps if we can say by motion of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as long as we're making it clear that that is an option but not a requirement, that seems like a reasonable suggestion. And otherwise, I thought that staff addressed the prior comments that the commission had on line edit type things. So I'm comfortable moving forward with it.
Is that a motion that you wanted to make, Commissioner Jennings?
Sure. I can move. I don't have the thing in front of me. Move to approve item 7-1, proposed amendments to chapter 2100 of the Albany Municipal Code.
So you'll also, it's adopting resolution 2020-05.
Adopting resolution 2020-05.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner McLeod with a second. Okay, great. Then on that motion, Commissioner Kent.
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson. Sorry, you were muted.
Oh, still muted.
Still muted, Commissioner Donaldson.
Give us a...
I'll vote no because of the resolution of intention issue. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Commissioner McLeod.
I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Jennings.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Donaldson dissenting on the initiation aspect. So with that, item 7-1 resolution has been approved. That'll take us on to our next item, item 7-2 green building ordinance. Staff for a presentation.
Yes, good evening again, Commissioners. Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director. I'm going to briefly reintroduce to you Michelle Plaus. Michelle has presented to you in the past. She's an analyst in our office and has been working very closely with the Climate Action Committee on developing these standards for green building. And it is an extraordinarily arcane area of building code standards, and she's done a fantastic job. So I'm just going to turn it over to her to make a brief presentation given the hour, and of course we would be happy to answer any of your questions if we end up going a little bit too quickly. So Michelle, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, it's good to see you all again. And luckily, the things I have to present to you haven't changed very much in the last 6 months. So I'm going to run through it rather quickly, but again, if you have questions, please feel free to ask at the end. So let's see. So I'm just going to go over some of the basics of what this proposal and resolution says, what the measures for green building look like, and then go over kind of a reminder of what we talked about in our previous meeting, some of the comments you guys had, and the changes that have taken place since then, and then the next steps and staff recommendation. So Cal Green is the green building code for California. It has mandatory requirements for the entire state, and they fall into these 5 categories you see on the side here. All kinds of different requirements for buildings to make them more energy efficient and a variety of other things as well. And then there are also voluntary tiers that individuals or cities can adopt for buildings, and they can adopt either an entire tier or just, you know, pieces, little measures out of each. And that's what we've done here. So the Climate Action Committee has picked specific measures that they thought were most important and best fitting for Albany. Now, as I said, cities can adopt some of these measures if they like. And for some of the measures, the energy efficiency measures, they also need to be approved by the California Energy Commission. And that basically requires that those energy efficiency standards be found cost effective. So they do these scientific studies that say that over a period of 30 years, the energy efficiency measure pays for itself, essentially. So all of the measures you'll see here are based on those cost effectiveness studies and have been found to be cost effective by the CEC. There we go, sorry. So first, a little bit of definitions before we get into what the standards themselves are, the proposed standards. They're measured in terms of energy design rating for residential buildings. And this is the new system that's being used to determine the efficiency of residential buildings. Every building gets a score between 0 and 100. 0 being a zero net energy home and 100 being equivalent to a 2006 IECC compliant home. And Cal Green sets mandatory EDR scores for each building, and they vary based on the size and type and climate zone. But each building will have that mandatory score that it has to hit to prove that it's efficient enough for the code. Now, the difference between the mandatory score and the actual score of the building is what's known as the EDR margin. So if the mandatory score is 23.9, like you see here, and your building was 23, then your margin would be 0.9. And so the proposal comes in the form of EDR margins. For instance, we have one type of building has an EDR margin of 10 requirement. So it would mean that those buildings would need to get 10 points more efficient than the state standard. And this is what you see here in the second column, this list of EDR margin proposals for different types of buildings. And the larger the margin, the larger the CO2 reduction, and also the larger the cost, the incremental cost to construction. And you can see here that the larger margins go with the mixed fuel buildings. I'll talk a little bit more about the reasoning behind that in a moment. For single family electric buildings, we have a 4.7 margin, and you'll see this is an efficiency margin. And all that means is that the margin has to be achieved not through the addition of solar panels, but by improving the efficiency of the building itself. So adding more insulation, better windows, those kinds of things. And then for multifamily electric buildings, there's no added requirement. It's just the same as the state. Oh, and by the way, that's only for new construction. This doesn't apply to renovated buildings, alterations, anything like that. Only new construction. And the same is true for non-residential buildings. They are calculated a slightly different way using compliance margins, but it's the same idea. It's just a percentage of how much better you are than the state mandate. And the higher the compliance margin, the greener the building. And again, we have a similar thing where the mixed fuel buildings have a higher compliance margin here, higher incremental cost, and a higher greenhouse gas reduction, except for the case of retail where they're both at 16%. And the reasoning behind this is part of the Climate Action Plan's larger goal of moving towards electrification. We have really clean electricity here in Albany. And so we're hoping to move our entire building stock towards that clean power. So it's creating an incentive for people to build electric buildings because it has that added requirement and added cost if you choose to go for mixed fuel. In addition, it means that the mixed fuel buildings that are built are going to be cleaner and greener. They're going to hit that maximum efficiency that the CEC is going to allow us. And then the electric buildings also do have some increased efficiency, but we're trying to keep that cost low. So especially on the residential buildings, you saw that the incremental cost was very small. And in the case of multifamily, electric, 0. The final energy efficiency proposal is for non-residential solar. So according to the current state code, all non-residential buildings are required to have a solar zone, which is basically a kind of prep area for eventually putting solar panels in. That's expected to be a requirement in a couple of years. But this proposal would get Albany ahead of the curve by requiring that solar panels are actually installed on that solar zone. Again, only for new construction. And they would be requiring solar panels on the entire solar zone, which is usually about 15% of the roof area. In the case that that would mean that you just have like millions of solar panels, which can happen from time to time, there would be an exemption where you'd only need the solar panels that would take care of the actual energy usage of the building. So it doesn't go over the top. And here we get to the other measures, the non-energy efficiency ones. These are generally simpler. I won't go through the whole list here, but overall, these are very low cost measures. The only one that has really a significant cost is the EV charging stations for multifamily parking. And again, that's only for new construction. All of the other ones are new construction and renovations, and these are very, very low cost, or in some cases, no cost. I'll just take a moment to read over those. And then here we have the requirements for non-residential buildings. Very similar, again, very low costs. Most of them for new construction and renovations, except for the indoor water use here. And this is just a little visual to give you a sense of how these measures line up with the climate action plan goals. They're all very much in line with the priorities of the climate action plan. That's why they were chosen. And they were also chosen to try to limit the cost impact on people, especially trying to do renovations. So just to remind you what we talked about back in June when I was here last, overall, the commission supported this proposal. I heard a lot of positive things, and especially this low cost for renovations. Several commissioners mentioned that they were okay with some of the higher costs for new construction, especially because it was really just for mixed fuel buildings, especially. And they were happy to see that for people that were trying to renovate, that were trying to maybe add to their house that had been there for a long time, that this proposal wouldn't put a huge cost burden on them and it wouldn't get in the way of some of those projects. It's really focusing the cost on the incentive towards electric and on people that are already taking on a huge project of building a newly constructed building. The one area where there was some concern was about this proposal to require that electrical panel upgrades all be 200 amps. This would have had a larger cost, an incremental cost on renovations. And the Climate Action Committee heard that concern and decided to actually remove that measure from the proposal. So that's no longer included in this. That's one of the main changes that's happened. The other change is there was a question about whether or not permeable paving would be kept in this proposal, this requirement that 30% of paving be permeable, and the Climate Action Committee chose to keep that in here. So electric panel upgrades are gone, permeable paving is in. Those are the only two things that have really changed. The Climate Action Committee has recommended the proposal to council, and staff has drafted a resolution that you guys got a draft of. It still doesn't have all of the legalese perfectly worked out, but none of the substantial stuff is changing. So hopefully you had a chance to look over that. And staff's recommendation is for the commission to recommend that resolution, to adopt that resolution and recommend it to the city council. And staff is going to be presenting this proposal and the resolution to council on December 21st. if it's approved by council, then it'll be sent to the CEC for approval, and then it will go into effect. All right, I know I ran through that really quickly, but please let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions before we open it to public comment?
No.
All right, seeing none. Chris, are there any members of public comment who'd like to speak?
Yes, there are two speakers. First, Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Thank you. So I'm so glad the Climate Action Committee is here this evening. I've been trying my hardest this whole night to be an advocate for a green building with all these new construction things regarding electrical vehicle charging and all the residential agenda items tonight. And so, yeah, the panel upgrade, 200 amps. I mean, it seems like it could be important to, include that at least, instead of just leaving it out. I'm just not sure the reasoning behind that. I guess it's the cost. But I don't know if the cost, the money thing is important enough to where, those panel upgrades are going to be able to run all this electricity. You're going to have a whole electricity building and an apartment complex. Things might need to be upgraded as well to maintain, electricity of the building, solar panels. I'm not sure if the Albany sauna, if their panel out there, what that amperage is, but it looks pretty heavy duty industrial. So, I mean, I support this whole green thing. I know the Climate Action Committee has been working on this for a while. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, we have Nick Peterson. Nick, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak in favor of this, and I appreciate you guys moving this along. I am a current member of the Climate Action Committee and also am a member of the Albany Climate Action Coalition. So I would encourage all members of the commission to please move this ahead. There's a real urgency in getting these kind of requirements out there, so any new buildings are more configured to what the new reality is and moving towards electrification. I'd also like to make a little comment about the concern about cost implications and all this. It's at some point we're headed towards net zero. So people doing work now, it's more cost effective for them to take on a little bit more cost so that later they won't have to do massive changes and try to adopt quickly. So I would encourage everyone to remember that we're balancing, a slightly increased or somewhat increased cost on the work we do to improve our homes against essentially destroying our entire environment by continuing to burn fossil fuels. So, putting it in that context, it's encouraging to see these things move along, but these are very small changes, and we're going to be coming to you guys with much more significant and serious changes. And just putting a dollar value on it is a little discouraging. I know the people we serve, we don't want to burden them unreasonably with that, but the Energy Commission already has the cost factor in there, and you can't do things that aren't going to pay off. So in my mind, we have a huge uphill battle, and we need to get these things out there and in place as quickly as possible and as creatively as we can. So thank you for moving this forward, and I appreciate your attention to this important issue. Thanks.
I see no other speakers.
Okay, seeing no other public speakers, then we will go ahead and close public comment and turn it back to the commission for deliberations. Does anyone have any comments? Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I was on the Green Building Subcommittee with a couple of members of the Climate Action Committee, and we were very careful to try to not do things that would be overly expensive but still reasonable in cost. And then there was definitely an effort to give incentives to go all electric. And, basically I'm really happy with what people have done so far. And I would have included the electrical panel upgrades with the idea that there could be subsidies or some sort of financial help. And with Measure DD having passed, with some amount of that money that's generated to be used for climate action, goal-oriented expenditures, that money could have possibly gone towards the electrical panel upgrades. But even without that in the package, I would just support we move this along and send it to council and worry about the other electrical panel upgrades later. And of course, I think there's a lot of other green building measures we could adopt, but it's something to look at in the future.
Well, I'll just chime in. No one else is jumping in here. I think this is great. I appreciate the feedback that was taken in focusing this on new construction. I definitely think for new construction projects, these are the types of moves that we should be encouraging, that they don't have a really, I think, as you've demonstrated in your presentation, really a net increase in cost of building housing for new construction. People are taking on big projects, and it kind of gives that pragmatic approach for folks who are just doing renovations to their homes who may not be able to afford full changes. So with all of those changes, I'm fully supportive of this ordinance and have no additional thoughts on this.
Just a small comment. First of all, I'm in support of the changes, but I think it's not quite as clear as if we don't make these changes, we're going to be running into an ecological disaster. What we're actually balancing here is making housing so efficient and so perfect, opposed to not making house for all. And so as we add expense onto building homes, then pushes people out. And so that's kind of the balance. We all want to make the most efficient house possible and as green as possible. But it comes at a balance, and this doesn't trigger that balance for me. This is fine. I just want to make sure that that's one thing we have to consider on this. So I would vote for it.
Nothing for me. I support it and appreciate the hard work that staff and the Community Action Committee have done.
Any final thoughts, or would somebody like to make a motion? Commissioner Donaldson?
No additional thoughts. I think Ian should make the motion.
Oh, okay. Find it. All right. All right. Where is it? Yeah, I move that we approve item 7-2 Green Building Ordinance to send it to the council for adoption.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Then on that motion, Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes.
Commissioner Kent.
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings.
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That resolution passes 5-0 with a recommendation to approve to City Council. That concludes new business, takes us to item 8 on our agenda. Announcements, item 8-1, San Pablo Avenue specific plan online survey.
Yeah, this is just a very brief announcement, but the virtual open house for the San Pablo Avenue specific plan is online. It's on the project website, which is sanpablospecificplan.org. And so we've put that out there. We're leaving that portion of the survey open until the end of the month, hoping that we get some feedback from residents and property owners and other interested parties as we continue this specific plan preparation process.
Great. Thank you.
Could I ask Ann, is there anything we should do as commissioners about that? Or it's for the public, right?
It's for the public, but yeah, you're certainly welcome to take a look at it. And if you know people who are engaged in this process or interested in participating, please feel free to pass this along.
Great. Thank you. All right. If nothing more on that, item 9, next meeting, January 13th, a little over a month from now. So happy holidays and happy future new year, everyone. I think we're all ready to get out of 2020. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Anyway,
Bye.
okay.
Take care.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.